Hello everyone, welcome back to Midnight Lullaby. I know many of you are here to drift gently into sleep. Before you close your eyes, please give this video a like and subscribe to the channel. I'd also love to hear from you in the comments. Let me know where in the world you're listening from. Now, turn off the lights, get comfortable, and let the story carry you into dreams. Story 1. I moved into Meridian Towers on a gray October morning. The kind where the sky and the building seemed to be made of the same material. The moving truck looked small and inadequate next to the structure that would be my new home. 32 stories of concrete and glass that rose from the earth like a monument to ambition, or perhaps hubris. My name is Percival Danvers. Percy to friends, Dr. Danvers to colleagues, though the distinction hardly mattered anymore. I was an engineer, recently divorced, recently relocated, recently everything. The apartment was a fresh start. The kind you make when the old life has been thoroughly dismantled, and you need walls around you that don't echo with memory. Apartment 1407, 14th floor. The real estate agent had mentioned it was a good value, and I understood why when I saw it. The apartment itself was fine. 2 bedrooms, good light, a view of the city that was acceptable if not spectacular. But the building had a quality I couldn't quite name. Something that made people uncomfortable without knowing why. I noticed it in the elevator on my first trip up. The numbers progressed normally, 1, 2, 3, and so on. But when we passed 12, there was the slightest hesitation before 14 appeared. A pause so brief you'd miss it if you weren't paying attention. But I was always paying attention. That's what engineers do. We notice the spaces between things, the places where numbers don't quite add up. The building superintendent, a man named Victor who spoke with a thick accent I couldn't place, helped me with the heavier furniture. He moved with the careful efficiency of someone who'd done this many times, but he also kept looking at me with an expression I couldn't read. Curiosity, concern, something else. "You will like it here," he said. Though it didn't sound like a prediction, it sounded like an instruction. "I's very good building, very safe. Rules are important, yes. Follow the rules, everything is good." I asked what rules. He smiled, showing too many teeth. The usual ones. No noise after 10. No pets without permission. And, he paused, looked around as if checking who might overhear, though we were alone in my empty apartment. Don't ask too many questions about the building. Is old, has its ways. Some things are better left alone. He was gone before I could respond, his footsteps echoing down the hallway with a rhythm that seemed slightly off. The first few weeks were an exercise in adjustment. I learned the building's patterns. Most residents kept to themselves, passing in hallways with barely a nod. The elderly woman in 1405 clutched her purse tighter whenever she saw me. The young couple in 1409 always seemed to be arguing in whispers that cut off the moment anyone approached. But it was the building itself that fascinated me. Old structures develop personalities, accumulate quirks. pipes that knock at certain temperatures, elevators that hesitate on particular floors, doors that won't quite close unless you know the trick. Meridian Towers had all of these and more. There were sounds in the walls that didn't match any mechanical system I could identify. The elevator still had that pause between 12 and 14, and sometimes late at night. I would feel the building shift in ways that had nothing to do with settling or wind load. I started mapping it. Not officially. Not at first. Just sketches on graph paper while I ate takeout at my kitchen counter. Floor plans based on my own apartment's layout, extrapolated upward and downward, but something didn't add up. The building was 32 stories. But when I calculated the actual height based on ceiling measurements, window spacing, and the external facade, I came up short. Not by much. Maybe 12 feet. But 12 feet is an entire floor in a building this old. I checked the architectural records at the city planning office, telling myself it was just curiosity, just the engineer in me unable to let an anomaly go. The original plans for Meridian Towers were filed in 1962 by an architect named Randolph Thresher. The building was completed in 1964, and according to the records, it had 33 floors. Not 32. 33. I stood in the archive room, holding those yellowed plans, and felt something cold move through my chest. 33 floors. But the elevator only went to 32, and it jumped from 12 to 14. There were 2 missing floors. That night, I couldn't sleep. I stood at my window, looking down at the city lights, and then up at the building rising above me, counting windows. The math was undeniable. Between the 12th and 14th floors, my floor, there was space for another level, and above the 32nd floor, the same thing. Hidden floors, deliberately concealed in the numbering, in the elevator system, in the collective consciousness of everyone who lived here. I had to see. The elevator wouldn't take me there, obviously, but buildings are made of physical space, and physical space can be accessed if you know where to look. I started in the stairwell, but the one the fire code required, but that no one ever seemed to use. It was narrower than modern standards would allow, with concrete walls painted an industrial green that hurt your eyes if you stared too long. I climbed from my floor, counting the steps. 12 steps per flight, consistent throughout, until I reached the transition between my floor and the one above. 24 steps, double, exactly double, and in the middle of that flight, barely visible because it was painted the same color as the wall, was a door. No handle. No number. Just a door frame and a crack, so thin you'd miss it if you weren't looking. I pressed my hand against it and felt the same coolness I'd felt from the building itself in those late night moments. A presence. A waiting. I didn't try to open it that night. I went back to my apartment, locked my door, and sat in the dark, thinking. Trying to be rational. But rationality didn't explain why a building would have hidden floors. Didn't explain why the architect's name, Randolph Thresher, had sounded familiar when I'd read it. like something from a story I'd once been told, but couldn't quite remember. I looked him up. Found newspaper archives from the 1960s. Randolph Thresher had been a prodigy, designing buildings throughout the city, each one more ambitious than the last. Meridian Towers was supposed to be his masterpiece. But something had gone wrong. The articles were vague, carefully worded. A scandal. Financial irregularities. Accusations of unsafe practices. Thresher had disappeared midway through construction, and a series of substitute architects had finished the project. The building opened on schedule, and Thresher was never heard from again. Professional disgrace, and then vanishing. The story of a man who'd lost everything. Or perhaps, I thought, staring at my computer screen at 3 a.m, the story of a man who'd never left his masterpiece at all. I went back to the stairwell the next night. Brought a screwdriver, a flashlight, a crowbar. The door had no handle, but it had hinges. And hinges mean structural weakness, if you know where to apply pressure. It took me an hour of careful work, trying to be quiet, listening for footsteps that never came. The stairwell felt empty in a way that was more than just absence of people. It felt forgotten, like a space the building itself had chosen not to see. The door finally gave with a sound like an exhale. Behind it was darkness, and a smell I recognized from other old buildings. Dust and paper, concrete and something else. Something lived in. I stepped through. The hallway beyond was narrow, with a lower ceiling than the regular floors. Emergency lighting glowed dimly at intervals, casting everything in a greenish twilight. There were doors along one side, numbered in a system I didn't recognize. And at the far end, light showed under what looked like a more substantial door. I moved toward it, my footsteps soundless on carpet that felt thick and new despite the decay everywhere else. The doors I passed had no names, no mail slots, nothing to indicate occupation. But some of them had sounds behind them. Breathing, movement, a television playing softly. People were living here. The door at the end was unlocked. I turned the handle slowly. My heart loud enough that I was sure whoever was inside must hear it. The room beyond was like stepping into a different time. It was furnished as an apartment, but from decades ago. Mid-century modern furniture, wood paneling, a rotary phone on a side table. Filing cabinets lined one wall, and covering every other available surface were papers. Blueprints, sketches, calculations, all relating to Meridian Towers. And sitting at a desk, his back to me, was a man. He was thin to the point of emaciation, wearing a cardigan that had gone threadbare at the elbows. His hair was white and uncombed. As I watched, he made a note on the paper in front of him, his handwriting spidery and precise. Apartment 1407, he said without turning around. His voice was surprisingly strong, cultured, with an accent that suggested old money and older education. Percy Danvers. Engineer, moved in 6 weeks ago, divorced, no pets, no visitors, but very, very curious. I should have run. Should have backed out slowly and never spoken of what I'd found. But you don't become an engineer without a certain stubbornness about puzzles. Randolph Thresher, I said. He turned then, and I saw his face. Old, impossibly old, with skin like parchment and eyes that were still sharp and bright. He smiled, and it was not an unkind expression. Decker Danvers, I was wondering when you'd find your way here. The others never do. They live their lives in ignorance, which is really for the best. But you... He gestured at me with a pen. You notice things. You count things. You couldn't help yourself. You're supposed to be dead, or gone.
Or?
Dead.
No.
Gone? Only from the world's perspective. I've been here all along. Right where I belong. He stood, moved to one of the filing cabinets, pulled out a drawer. Do you want to see? Do you want to understand? I nodded, though I wasn't sure I did. He showed me. Files on every resident who'd ever lived in Meridian Towers. Detailed notes on their habits, their schedules, their secrets. Security camera feeds that shouldn't exist. Audio recordings from apartments that thought they were private. Decades of observation, of control, of a man who'd built a kingdom and never left it. They took everything from me, Thresher said, his voice taking on an edge. My reputation, my career, my future, all because I demanded perfection, because I saw corners being cut, safety being compromised, and I refused to look away. So they destroyed me, made me a pariah, made sure I'd never work again. He moved to the window, his own window, looking out at the city from this hidden space between spaces. But they couldn't take the building. It was mine. Built to my specifications, with my modifications. They thought they'd removed me from the project. But I'd already created these spaces. Room for me. Room for others like me, the ones the world wanted to forget. And from here, I could ensure everything stayed perfect. Every repair done correctly. Every upgrade to my standards. Every resident. He paused. Every resident properly managed. Managed. I repeated the word heavy in my mouth. The building is a living system, Dr. Danvers. It requires maintenance, adjustment. Sometimes residents become problematic. They damage things. They complain too much. They threaten to expose what shouldn't be exposed. When that happens, I take care of it. Take care of it how? His smile was sad. How do you think? Where do you think people go when they disappear from Meridian Towers? When they leave no forwarding address? When their apartments are cleared out overnight? When even their families can't find them? He gestured around us. The 13th floor has quite a few permanent residents now. Very quiet. Very well behaved. No complaints at all. I felt sick. You're telling me you kill people. I protect my building. Evict problem tenants permanently. It's all in the lease, really, if you read the fine print. I wrote it myself. He moved back to his desk, picked up a file. My file, I realized. You've been very well behaved so far. Quiet. Respectful of the structure. I've enjoyed having an engineer in residence. Someone who appreciates the architecture. But this... He tapped the file. This curiosity is a problem. I backed toward the door. I'm leaving. I'm moving out. You'll never see me again. I'm afraid that's not possible. You know too much now. And besides," he tilted his head, listening to something I couldn't hear. "You've triggered the building's defenses. Did you notice how quiet the stairwell was when you came up? How empty? The building knows when someone's accessing the 13th floor. It seals the area, redirects people, ensures privacy." The door behind me clicked shut. "Don't be afraid," Thresher said, moving toward me with slow, deliberate steps. "The process is quite humane. You'll simply become another permanent resident. Another part of the building. You won't even need food or water after a while. The building provides. The building sustains. You'll see." But he'd made a mistake. He'd shown me the files, the camera feeds, the control systems. And I was an engineer. I understood systems. Understood their weaknesses. The building's mechanicals ran through hidden spaces behind the walls. The very spaces Thresher had created for his own purposes could be used against him. And old buildings, even perfectly maintained ones, had vulnerabilities. I ran. Not for the door, but for the filing cabinets. Thresher shouted something. But I was already pulling drawers, scattering papers, looking for what I knew had to be there. Every control system had manual overrides. Every secured space had emergency protocols. I found it. A panel behind the cabinets, with old-style switches and circuit breakers. The building's main control systems, all routed through Thresher's hidden floor, so he could monitor and manipulate everything. "Don't touch that." Thresher's voice was sharp with panic. "You don't understand what you're doing. The building needs those systems. Without them," I started throwing switches, randomly, desperately. I heard machinery grinding to a halt. Heard alarms starting somewhere distant. Heard the building itself groan. Thresher grabbed my arm, his grip surprisingly strong. We struggled, and I felt how thin he was, how fragile despite his strength. A man sustained by obsession and the strange energy of this place he'd created. The lights went out. Emergency systems kicked in, bathing everything in red, and then the floor began to shake. Whatever I disrupted, it was major. I could hear crashes from other parts of the floor, could feel the building responding to the loss of systems it had relied on for decades. Thresher fell back, his face horrified. "You've killed it," he whispered. "You've killed my building. I'm just killing the parts you added. The building will survive. You won't control it anymore." I ran for the door, got it open, stumbled into the stairwell. Behind me, I heard Thresher screaming, but whether in rage or grief I couldn't tell. The building was in chaos. Alarms everywhere. Water spraying from burst pipes. Residents emerging into hallways, confused and frightened. I joined them. Just another resident caught in whatever malfunction was happening. The fire department came. Engineers from the city. Building inspectors. They found the 13th floor. Found it empty except for evidence of someone having lived there for decades. Found the 33rd floor too. Another hidden space full of machinery and control systems and things that shouldn't have been there. They found bodies. 5 of them. Residents who disappeared over the years, kept in a state I don't want to describe. The forensics team worked for weeks. They never found Randolph Thresher. Not alive, anyway. But in one of the walls they opened during the investigation, they found bones. Old bones with evidence of trauma that suggested he'd been dead for years. The thing that had been calling itself Thresher, the thing that had shown me the files and controlled the building, was never found. Some of the other residents, when interviewed, said they'd sometimes seen a thin man in old-fashioned clothes. Others said they'd heard voices in the walls, but nothing conclusive. Nothing that proved what I knew, that the building itself had sustained him somehow, had kept him going long past when he should have died. Meridian Towers was condemned for 6 months, while they fixed everything. When it reopened, it was under new management. The hidden floors were converted to storage. The control systems were replaced with modern, transparent ones. No more secrets. No more hidden spaces. I didn't move back. I couldn't. But sometimes I drive past it, and I look up at that building, and I count the windows. They renumbered the floors properly now. There's a 13th floor listed openly. There's a 33rd floor too. And sometimes, late at night, I wonder what happened to the thing that was Thresher. If destroying his control systems destroyed him too. Or if he's still there somehow, in the walls, in the infrastructure, waiting. Still watching his building, still maintaining his kingdom. The other day I got a letter. No return address. Inside was a single sheet of paper with architectural drawings. My current apartment building, with modifications marked in a spidery, precise hand. And a note. Every building needs a caretaker. Every structure has its secrets. You understand now. You could do what I did, but better. With real knowledge, real skills. Think about it, Dr. Danvers. Think about what you could create. I burned it. Burned the drawings and the note, and told myself I'd forget about it. But I haven't. And when I walk through my current building, I find myself noticing things. Counting steps, measuring spaces, seeing where new systems could be added, hidden systems, control systems. I haven't done anything yet. But I understand the temptation. The appeal of a kingdom you built yourself, where everything runs according to your specifications, where you're essential and eternal and absolutely in control. I understand it more than I want to admit. And that's the most frightening thing of all. Story 2. The pet shop had been a fixture on Ashwood Street for as long as I could remember, tucked between a laundromat and a used bookstore. Its windows always full of colorful fish tanks and the occasional sleeping cat. I'd walked past it hundreds of times on my way to and from work, sometimes stopping to look at the animals, sometimes just noting its familiar presence in the urban landscape. Then, overnight, it changed. The shift was subtle at first. The animals in the window display had always rotated. Puppies giving way to rabbits, giving way to exotic birds. But one morning I noticed the same 3 goldfish had been there for several days. Small detail, easy to dismiss. But then, the days became weeks, and those same goldfish remained, their movements growing more lethargic, the water in their tank taking on a cloudy quality. I should have said something. Called animal services or knocked on the door to check on them. But there's a peculiar paralysis that comes with witnessing slow motion disaster, a tendency to assume someone else will intervene, that the problem will resolve itself, that you're overreacting to something that probably has a perfectly mundane explanation. By the time I finally did knock, the fish were floating at the surface of the tank. The door was unlocked. I pushed it open, calling out a greeting, some version of, "Hello, is anyone here?" and was hit immediately by the smell. Not the clean pet shop smell of cedar shavings and kibble, but something older, damper, like basements and rot and organic decay. The lights were off, the interior dim despite it being midday, sunlight somehow failing to penetrate past the grimy front windows. I stepped inside anyway, telling myself I'd do a quick check. Make sure no other animals were suffering. Then call the authorities. The shop seemed larger than it should have been. The rows of empty cages and aquariums stretching back further than the building's exterior suggested was possible. Spatial logic that worked from outside, but broke down once you were within. "Hello," I called again, my voice sounding flat and strange, absorbed by the space rather than echoing. A sound from the back of the shop. Movement, heavy and deliberate. Footsteps. The owner emerged from the shadows, and I felt immediate dissonance. I'd seen him before, dozens of times, a middle, aged man with graying hair and a kind face. Always willing to discuss the care, requirements of various animals with customers who stopped in to browse. But the person walking toward me now looked wrong. The same features, roughly, but arranged in a way that suggested someone had described the pet shop owner to an artist who'd never actually seen him. "We're closed," he said, his voice carrying that same flat quality as mine, sound without resonance. "The door was unlocked," I replied, "and I was worried about the animals. The fish in the window. They're dead." "I know." He stopped a few feet away, not quite meeting my eyes. "Everything dies eventually. I'm in the process of closing down, selling off the remaining stock. Selling. But there aren't any animals here." I gestured at the empty cages, the drained aquariums, the vacant perches and cold terrariums. "Not anymore." He agreed. "They've all been sold, or released, or they're gone. It doesn't matter how, does it? The result is the same. Something was very wrong. I should have left. Should have backed out of the shop and called the authorities to deal with whatever this situation was. But I found myself asking instead what happened. "Why are you closing?" He laughed, a sound without humor. "Because the animals left. Every single one of them. Vanished overnight, cages locked, doors secure. But when I came in one morning, they were gone. Every dog, every cat, every bird and fish and reptile, gone. That's not possible. isn't it?" He moved closer, and I could see his eyes now, really see them, and they were wrong too. The color was right brown, but the light in them was off, as if he was looking at things I couldn't see, things existing in dimensions I didn't have access to. Everything's possible when you break the rules, when you stop treating them like they have value, like they're more than just merchandise to be moved and sold. "I don't understand. I stopped caring," he said simply. "Started seeing them as product instead of living things. Numbers on a ledger instead of beings with needs and feelings. And they knew. Somehow they knew. And they left." The way he said, it suggested this was more than simple neglect, that something deeper had fractured. Where did they go? I don't know. But I can hear them sometimes, at night. When the shop is dark and I'm here alone, trying to figure out what to do next. I hear scratching in the walls, movement in the ceiling, breathing in the basement. They didn't leave the shop, I think. They just left visibility. They're still here, in the spaces between what I can see and what I can't. Watching me, judging me. This was clearly the rambling of someone experiencing a breakdown. Mental health crisis brought on by stress, or guilt, or some chemical imbalance. The rational response was to extract myself from the situation as quickly and safely as possible. I said carefully, "Doctor, maybe? Someone who can help. Help." He laughed again. That same hollow sound. "There's no help for what I've done. You don't understand. It's not that I was cruel. Not that I beat them or starved them. It was more insidious than that. I stopped seeing them. They became invisible to me, even when they were right in front of me. And now I'm becoming invisible too. Fading. Can you see me clearly? Really see me?" I looked at him, tried to focus on his features, but he was right. There was something indefinite about him, something that refused to hold shape. Like trying to remember a face from a dream. You know what it should look like, but the details slip away when you try to grasp them. "I can see you," I said, but I wasn't sure it was true. "Then you're lucky. Most people who come by now, they look right through me. Walk past the shop like it's not even here, like it's already disappeared." He moved to one of the empty cages, ran his hand along the bars. I tried to fix it, started a ritual. Something I found online in forums where people discuss these things. Ways to undo damage, to call back what you've lost. But it's not working the way it was supposed to. It's making things worse. A ritual. I repeated, alarm bells ringing louder in my head. What kind of ritual? Doesn't matter. It requires belief, requires seeing clearly. And I've lost the ability to do that. I can't see them anymore, even though I know they're here. Can't see myself anymore. Even though I'm still speaking, still moving through space. Everything's becoming shadows and suggestions. I backed toward the door, slowly, trying not to make sudden movements that might provoke whatever this was. "I think you need help. Professional help. And I'm going to go now." "Wait," he said, and there was desperation in his voice. You can see me, which means you still have the ability. You could help finish the ritual, bring them back, make everything right again. I'm not doing any ritual. I'm leaving, and I'm calling someone who can actually help you. Please. He was begging now, and there were tears on his face, I think. Though they kept disappearing before, I could be certain they were real. I can't do it alone. I need someone who can still see, who can still believe. The animals are waiting. They'll come back if someone calls them properly. If someone acknowledges them with real attention. I reached the door, my hand on the handle, and made the mistake of looking back. The shop was different now, darker, the remaining light seeming to drain away into corners and crevices. And in that darkness, I saw them. Not clearly, not definitively, but in the way you see movement in your peripheral vision, sense presences in rooms you think are empty. The animals, all of them, dogs and cats and birds and fish, and creatures I couldn't name. Not quite solid, not quite ghost, existing in that uncertain space between. They were watching us. Waiting. Do you see them? The owner asked, his voice breaking. Please tell me you see them. I see something. I admitted, unable to deny what my eyes were showing me. Then you can help. You can complete the ritual. It just requires acknowledgement. Requires someone to see them fully, to confirm their existence, to invite them back. Back to what? To being trapped in cages, to being sold as commodities. Back to being real, he said. Back to existing in a form that matters. Right now they're stuck, neither here nor gone. Suspended because I broke something fundamental when I stopped caring. But if someone who still has the capacity for genuine sight, for real attention, if someone like that acknowledges them, they can resolve into one state or another. I should have left. Every self-preservation instinct was screaming at me to leave. To get away from this place and this man and these impossible shadows moving in the darkness. But there was something in what he'd said that resonated. The idea that being truly seen, truly acknowledged, was what allowed things to be real. That invisibility, being looked through and looked past, was a kind of death. What would I need to do? I asked, surprising myself. He moved quickly then, pulling objects from beneath the counter. Candles, bowls, what looked like small bones arranged in patterns I didn't recognize. Just stand in the center and speak the acknowledgement. Say that you see them, that they exist, that they matter. Simple words, but they have to be meant. They have to come from genuine recognition. And then what happens? They become real again, solid, visible to everyone, not just those few who still know how to look. And maybe, if it works, I become real again too. Maybe I stop fading. The shadows in the shop were moving more actively now, pressing closer, and I could feel their attention like physical weight. Dozens of eyes, hundreds maybe, all focused on me, all waiting to see what I would choose. I stepped forward, into the center of the space he'd cleared, surrounded by his ritual components, his desperate attempt to undo whatever he'd done. The candles flickered despite no breeze, casting light that seemed to reveal more darkness than it illuminated. "What are the words?" I asked. He told me. Simple phrases, as he'd said, but weighted with intention. "I see you. You exist. You matter." Repeated 3 times with feeling, with attention, with genuine acknowledgement. I began to speak. "I see you." The shadows moved closer, taking on more definition. I could see fur, scales, feathers, eyes reflecting the candlelight. "You exist." The air grew colder, thick with presence, with beings occupying space that should have been empty. I could hear them now, breathing, moving, making the small sounds of living creatures. "You matter." Something shifted. The world seemed to tilt, a reality bending to accommodate what was being called into existence. The animals were resolving, becoming more solid with each repetition of the acknowledgement. But so was something else. As I spoke the words the second time, I realized the pet shop owner was fading further, not resolving into solidity, but dissipating, becoming more shadow than substance. The ritual wasn't restoring him, it was replacing him. The animal's reality was being purchased with his existence, a transaction I hadn't understood until it was too late to stop. "I see you. You exist. You matter." The 3rd repetition, and the transformation completed. The animals were fully present now, solid and real and visible. Dogs and cats and birds filled the shop, moving freely, no longer contained in cages or tanks. They looked at me with gratitude, or recognition, or perhaps just the simple acknowledgement that I had seen them when someone else had stopped. And the owner was gone. Not dead, I don't think, but faded completely into that same uncertain space his animals had occupied. A shadow now, a suggestion, a presence that might still exist in peripheral vision, but would never again be fully solid, fully real. I stood there, surrounded by freed animals in an impossible pet shop, understanding that I'd completed something I didn't fully comprehend, with consequences I couldn't predict. The animals began to leave, not fleeing, but departing with purpose, walking through the walls as if the boundaries of the physical building were suggestions rather than barriers. Within minutes, the shop was empty again. The animals dispersed into the city, into the world, carrying with them whatever reality I'd helped restore. I left too, stepping out onto Ashwood Street, which looked exactly as it always had. The pet shop behind me seemed normal now. Door locked, lights off. A simple, closed business with no signs of the impossible events that had just occurred within. But I'd changed. I walked home with an awareness I hadn't possessed before, seeing the city differently. Noticing the things that existed in the margins, the beings and presences that most people looked through, looked past, dismissed as tricks of light or imagination. They were everywhere, I realized, these half-visible things. These entities that persisted in uncertain states because no one took the time to truly see them, to acknowledge their existence with genuine attention. And sometimes, late at night, I think I see him. The pet shop owner, standing outside the abandoned store, looking in through windows that now stay dark. Fading but not gone. Existing in that space between visibility and absence, paying the price for his lapse in caring. A for allowing living things to become invisible through his indifference. I tried going back once, a week later, wanting to check, to understand, to see if the shop was truly abandoned or if something else had taken up residence there. But the building was gone. Or rather, it was there, but different. The space occupied now by something else, a convenience store, or maybe an empty lot. Memory disagreed with reality, and I couldn't trust either. The animals I sometimes see around the city, or I think I do. A dog that looks familiar, a cat with a distinctive marking, birds with patterns I remember from the shop. They see me too, I think. Recognize me as someone who acknowledged them, who spoke them back into existence. They watch me with what might be gratitude, or might just be the simple awareness that I'm someone who knows how to look, who hasn't yet learned to see through things. I've become more careful now about attention, about what I choose to see and what I allow to fade into the background of my awareness, because I understand that being seen, being acknowledged, being treated as real and mattering, these aren't just psychological concepts. They're fundamental to existence itself. Stop seeing something long enough, stop caring about it with genuine attention, and it begins to fade, to slip into that uncertain space where the pet shop owner now resides. And I wonder, sometimes, if the same thing could happen to me. If I become too invisible, too much a background presence in other people's lives. If I allow myself to fade through lack of acknowledgement, would I dissolve the way he did? Would I become one of those shadows? Those suggestions, those beings that exist in peripheral vision, but never quite resolve into solidity. The thought keeps me engaged, keeps me present, keeps me looking at the world and the people and the beings in it with genuine attention. Because I've seen what happens when you stop. I've witnessed the cost of indifference, of treating living things as if they're not quite real, not quite worth the effort of true recognition. The pet shop is still there, I think, existing in some space adjacent to the normal world. And the owner is still there too, trapped in his ritual's consequences, neither fully present nor fully absent. A warning, maybe, or a reminder. See clearly, or risk becoming as invisible as the things you've stopped seeing. I see them now, everywhere I look. The animals that persist in uncertain states. The people who are fading from lack of acknowledgement. The beings that exist in the corners of vision, waiting for someone to confirm their reality. They're all around us, always have been, waiting for someone to speak the simple words. I see you. You exist. You matter. And in speaking those words, in meaning them, we keep the world solid, keep ourselves solid, keep reality from dissolving into shadows and suggestions. The pet shop owner taught me that, though he paid a terrible price for the lesson. I just hope I remember it well enough to avoid paying the same price myself. Every day, I practice seeing, truly seeing. acknowledging the reality of the beings around me, refusing to let them fade into background noise, into invisibility, into that uncertain space where they might persist but never quite exist. It's exhausting, this constant attention, but the alternative is worse. The alternative is fading, and I've seen where that leads. In the abandoned pet shop on Ashwood Street, that may or may not still exist, where the shadows move with the shapes of animals, and one human figure stands forever at the threshold, unable to enter, unable to leave, unable to be truly seen. I won't become him. I see too much now to ever stop looking. And maybe that's the point. Maybe that's the only way to stay real. Story 3. I touched the tree on a Thursday afternoon in late September. It was an accident, really. I'd been hiking the old forest trail behind my grandfather's property, taking photographs for my thesis on environmental conservation. The tree stood in a clearing I'd never noticed before, despite having walked these woods for 20 years. It was massive, easily 1,000 years old, perhaps older. Its trunk was so wide that 5 people holding hands couldn't have encircled it. The bark was deeply furrowed, almost black, with patches of moss creating patterns that looked almost like faces if you stared too long. Its branches spread like arthritic fingers against the autumn sky, twisted and gnarled, bare of leaves, even though the surrounding forest still held its color. There was something compelling about it, something that drew me closer despite the sudden chill I felt as I approached. The clearing was unnaturally quiet. No bird song, no rustle of small animals in the undergrowth. Just silence and the whisper of wind through those skeletal branches. I should have recognized the warning signs, should have listened to the primal part of my brain that was screaming at me to leave. But I was a graduate student, a scientist, in training, and I didn't believe in superstition. So when I leaned in to photograph the intricate patterns of the bark, when my palm pressed against the trunk to steady myself, I thought nothing of it. The bark was cold, not autumn cool, but cold like ice, like death. The moment my skin made contact, I felt something, a jolt, like static electricity, but deeper, traveling through my bones rather than across my skin. The world tilted slightly. My vision blurred, and I heard it. A whisper that wasn't sound but sensation. Words that bypassed my ears and went straight into my mind. You have awakened me. You have touched without permission. The debt must be paid. I jerked my hand back, stumbling backward. My camera fell, hitting the ground with a crack. For just a moment, I thought I saw something in the patterns of the bark. Eyes, countless eyes, opening and closing. But when I blinked, there was nothing. Just an old tree, silent and still. I ran. I don't remember picking up my camera or finding the trail. I just remember running, branches tearing at my clothes, my breath coming in ragged gasps. When I finally burst out of the woods onto my grandfather's property, the sun was setting and my hands were bleeding from where I'd scraped them on bark and stone. My grandfather was on the porch, smoking his pipe, when he saw me His face went pale. "You found the old tree," he said. "It wasn't a question." "How did you—" "Your hands," he interrupted, pointing with his pipe. "You're bleeding, but not from the palms, from the backs. As if—" He trailed off, took a long draw from his pipe. "As if something was trying to pull you in, trying to keep you." I looked at my hands. He was right. The scratches were on the backs, running from wrist to knuckles. As if I'd been grabbing onto something, or as if something had been grabbing onto me. While I pulled away. "Sit down," my grandfather said. "I need to tell you about the tree." The story he told was part local history, part legend. Impossible to verify. According to him, the tree had been there long before European settlers arrived. The indigenous people who'd lived in these forests had considered it sacred, or perhaps taboo. The distinction in the stories wasn't clear. They'd built no homes near it, had carved no marks on it, had told their children never to touch it. "The tree remembers," they'd said. "The tree keeps count, and it always collects what it's owed." The settlers, being settlers, had ignored the warnings. A logging company in the 1850s had tried to cut it down. 5 men with axes and saws. All 5 were dead within a week. Accidents, mostly. One fell from his horse and broke his neck. Another drowned in a river only 3 feet deep. The third went mad and walked into the winter forest without a coat, freezing to death within sight of his own home. The 4th and 5th died in a sawmill accident, crushed by falling timber. The tree remained standing. There were other stories. A young couple who'd carved their initials into the bark in the 1920s. Both died in the Spanish flu outbreak, along with their newborn child. A developer in the 1970s who'd tried to purchase the land to clear it for housing. Heart attack at 40, too. No prior history of heart disease. People who touch it die, my grandfather said flatly. Not right away. That would be too obvious. But within a year, something happens. An accident, an illness. Bad luck that compounds until... He made a gesture with his hand, a falling motion. "That's ridiculous," I said, trying to sound confident. Correlation isn't causation. People die. That's what people do. That's what I used to think too, my grandfather said, until I touched it myself. Back in '62. I was young, stupid, didn't believe the old stories. I carved my name in the bark, just a little mark. Figured if I died, I'd prove the story true. If I didn't, I'd prove it false. He pulled back his shirt collar. There, just above his collarbone, was a long, twisted scar. Farm accident 3 months later. Tractor rolled over on me. Should have died. Would have if the neighbor hadn't been nearby. Crushed 3 ribs, punctured a lung, broke my collarbone in 4 places. Spent 2 months in the hospital. Doctors said it was a miracle I survived. So you didn't die, I pointed out. Doesn't that disprove the curse? The tree doesn't just kill, my grandfather said. It collects. Sometimes it takes your life. Sometimes it takes pieces of it. Your health, your happiness, the people you love. He looked away, and I saw something in his expression I'd never seen before. Guilt. grief. Your grandmother and I lost 3 babies after that accident. Miscarriages, stillbirths. We'd been trying for years before. No problems. After I touched the tree, we couldn't carry a child to term. Until your father. He was the 4th attempt, the only one who survived. But your grandmother, the last birth nearly killed her. She was never the same after. I felt cold despite the warm evening air. You think the tree did that? Caused the miscarriages? I think the tree takes what it's owed. Sometimes that's a life. Sometimes it's lives that could have been. Sometimes it's just years off the end, quality stolen from quantity. He met my eyes, and you touched it today. So now it's your turn to pay. I wanted to dismiss it all as superstition. Wanted to believe that my grandfather's tragedies were just the cruel randomness of life, not the result of some malevolent tree spirit. But I couldn't forget the sensation of touching that bark. The whisper in my mind, the eyes I'd seen, or imagined I'd seen, opening in the wood. That night, I had the first dream. I was back in the clearing. But it was different. The tree was larger, impossibly large, its branches reaching across the entire sky. And it was full of people, hanging from the branches like fruit, dozens of them, hundreds, their bodies swaying in a wind I couldn't feel. Some were fresh, still bleeding. Others were skeletal, picked clean by time. And they were all watching me. You owe us, they whispered in unison. You woke us. You disturbed our rest. Pay the debt. Pay with blood, with breath, with years. I woke up screaming, tangled in sweat, soaked sheets. My hands were bleeding again. The scratches on the backs had reopened, seeping through the bandages I'd applied. The accident started small. A cut while chopping vegetables that required stitches. A slip on the stairs that left me with a sprained ankle. A minor car accident. Someone ran a red light. T-boned my driver's side. I walked away with bruises, but the car was totaled. Bad luck, people said. These things happen. But they kept happening. With increasing frequency. With increasing severity. I fell off a ladder while changing a light bulb and fractured my wrist. I got food poisoning so severe, I was hospitalized for dehydration. I developed an infection in the stitches from the kitchen knife incident that spread rapidly, requiring IV antibiotics. My advisor started making concerned comments about my health. My friends stopped inviting me to do things because I was always having some emergency. My girlfriend, ex-girlfriend now, left because she said I was becoming morbid, obsessed with death. She wasn't wrong. I was obsessed because I could feel it now. The tree's presence, like a weight on my chest, a cold spot in my mind. It was waiting, patient, collecting its due one piece at a time. I did research. Spent hours in the university library, combing through local history archives, indigenous folklore collections, anything that might explain the tree or tell me how to break the curse. Most of what I found was vague. Stories about sacred groves, taboo trees, spirits that inhabited old-growth forests. But there was one account, buried in a collection of indigenous oral histories, from the 1930s that caught my attention. An elder had told the interviewer about the memory tree. According to the story, it wasn't just a tree. It was a keeper of lives, a recorder of deaths. Every person who died in the forest, their spirit was caught in the tree's roots. It fed on death, on the energy of ending, and in exchange, it remembered. It kept the dead from being forgotten. But if someone touched the tree without proper reverence, without permission, the tree would take offense, would mark them, and it would collect what it was owed. A life for a disturbance, a death to feed its roots. The only way to break the curse, the elder said, was to give the tree what it wanted willingly. To offer yourself completely, without resistance. To let it take what it would take. But to do so with acceptance rather than fear. Only in surrender can you be released, the old story said. Only by accepting death can you choose life. I didn't want to die. I was 20, 6 years old with my whole life ahead of me. But I also couldn't keep living like this, waiting for the next accident, the next miss the inevitable moment when my luck would run out completely and the tree would collect its final payment. On the anniversary of touching the tree, exactly 1 year later, I went back to the clearing. It was autumn again, the same time of year, the same quality of light filtering through the bare branches, the same unnatural silence. But this time, I went prepared. I'd fasted for 3 days, as some of the old stories suggested. I'd bathed in cold water. I'd written letters to everyone I loved, just in case. The tree was waiting. I could feel its presence before I even saw it. A pull in my chest, like a rope attached to my sternum. When I entered the clearing, the temperature dropped 20 degrees in an instant. I walked up to the trunk. Up close, I could see things I'd missed before. Names carved into the bark, dozens of them, weathered and faded. Dates going back centuries. And in the patterns of the wood, if I looked just right, I could see them. The faces, the eyes, all the people the tree had claimed, preserved somehow in its substance. I'm here, I said aloud. My voice sounded small in the oppressive quiet. I touched you without permission. I disturbed you. I owe you a debt, and I'm ready to pay it. The whisper came again. That sensation of words without sound. Then place your hand upon me. Place your hand and accept what comes. No resistance. No fear. Only acceptance. I took a deep breath. Thought of my grandfather, who'd survived but paid in other ways. Thought of all the people whose names were carved in that bark, who hadn't survived at all. Thought of the year I'd just lived through, constantly afraid, constantly waiting for death. I placed my palm flat against the bark. It was still cold, still wrong. But this time, I didn't pull away. This time, I leaned into it, opened myself to it. Let it flow into me. The coldness, the darkness, the weight of centuries. I saw them. All the lives the tree had claimed. Felt their deaths like echoes, like memories that weren't mine. The loggers, the lovers, the developers and dreamers who'd touched without reverence and paid the price. I felt their fear, their pain, their final moments, and I felt the tree itself, not malevolent, not evil, ancient, operating on logic that had nothing to do with human morality. It was a keeper, a guardian, a living record of all the death that had occurred in these woods for 1,000 years. It demanded respect because respect was its due. It demanded reverence because it was holy, not in a way humans understood holiness, but in its own terms. I had disturbed it, had touched carelessly, thoughtlessly, treating it as a mere object to be photographed and studied. And so it had marked me, had begun the slow collection of what I owed. But now I was offering payment willingly, offering myself without resistance. You understand, the whisper came, and this time there was something like surprise in it. You see what I am, what I do, why I must collect. I understand, I said, and I did. Take what you need. I won't fight. The coldness intensified. I felt it spread through my body, into my chest, around my heart. This was it. This was where I died, standing in this clearing with my hand on this ancient tree, another name to be carved in the bark. I closed my eyes, accepted it, let go, and then warmth, not heat, but the absence of cold. The weight lifted from my chest. The pressure released. I opened my eyes and pulled my hand away, this time not in fear, but simply because the connection was complete. The tree was silent, still, just an old tree in a clearing, without menace or presence. The debt is paid, came the whisper fainter now. You offered without fear. You accepted without resistance. You saw me as I am and honored that seeing. The debt is paid. I stumbled back, confused. But I'm not dead. Death is not the only payment, the whisper said. Sometimes the offering of death is enough. Sometimes surrender is the coin that settles the debt. You were willing. That was the price. I walked out of the clearing on shaking legs. When I looked back, the tree seemed somehow smaller. Or perhaps I just saw it differently now. Not as a monster, but as something ancient and inhuman that simply was, operating according to its own incomprehensible logic. The accidents stopped. No more mysterious cuts, no more near misses, no more compounding bad luck. My life returned to normal. Or as normal as it could be after experiencing something that shouldn't exist according to any rational understanding of the world. But I was changed. I see things differently now. Old trees, ancient places, the wild spaces that humans claim to own but never truly understand. There are things in this world older than us, operating on rules we didn't make and can't change. We can respect them or we can disturb them, but we can't ignore them, no matter how hard we try. My grandfather died last month, peacefully in his sleep at 91 years old. Before he passed, he told me he was proud I'd survived, that I'd figured out what he never had, that the tree didn't want to kill, it wanted acknowledgement, respect, payment for disturbance. You did better than me, he said. You gave it what it wanted before it had to take. I inherited his property, including the woods and the clearing. The tree still stands there, silent and ancient. I visit it sometimes, carefully, with reverence. I don't touch it anymore. But I leave offerings. Water in the dry seasons, whispered thanks for the lives it's preserved, acknowledgement of what it is and what it guards. The dreams have never completely stopped. Once a month, maybe, I dream of that tree, of the faces in the bark, of the people hanging like fruit from its branches. But now they're not threatening. They're just watching, waiting, remembering. Because that's what the tree does. It remembers every life that's touched it, every death that's occurred near it, every disturbance and every reverence. It keeps count across centuries. It collects what it's owed, and it always will. If you ever find yourself in an ancient forest, in a clearing that feels too quiet, standing before a tree that radiates wrongness and age and power, don't touch it. Don't carve your name. Don't lean against its trunk, or break its branches, or treat it as if it was simply wood and bark. Because it isn't. Some trees are more than trees. Some trees remember. Some trees collect. And if you do touch it, if you do disturb it, don't run. Don't hide. Don't fight what comes. Go back. Stand before it, and offer what it's owed willingly, without fear, with acceptance and respect. It might not save your life, but it might let you choose how you pay the debt. And sometimes, that's all we can ask for. Story 4. I needed the money. That's what I keep telling myself, even now. I needed it badly enough to ignore the warnings my gut was sending, badly enough to sign papers I didn't fully read, badly enough to walk through those doors knowing something felt wrong, but doing it anyway. The ad was simple. Participants needed for social psychology research study. 2 weeks and 15,000 compensation. Must be willing to stay on, site for duration of study. Meals and accommodation provided. No prior experience necessary. $15,000. That was 3 months' rent. Plus enough to pay off the loan sharks who'd started leaving increasingly. Creative threats on my voicemail. So I called the number. Went through a brief phone screening and was told to arrive at the Behavioral Sciences Institute the following Monday at 9 a.m. sharp. The building was in an industrial part of the city I'd never visited. All concrete and steel, anonymous and functional. No sign outside, just an address. I almost turned around. But then I thought about Marcus and his very specific description of what would happen to my kneecaps if I didn't pay him by the end of the month. I went inside. The lobby was sterile white, empty except for a reception desk where a woman with a practiced smile checked my name against a tablet. Daniel Morrison. Danny, I said. Everyone calls me Danny. She made a note. We'll be using your full name during the study. Daniel, please have a seat. Dr. Reeves will be with you shortly. There was something in her tone, a subtle emphasis on my full name, that made my skin prickle. But I sat, and I waited, because I needed that money. Dr. Reeves was younger than I expected. The probably early 40s, with silver-rimmed glasses and the kind of calm, measured voice that made you want to trust him. He led me through a series of corridors, each one identical to the last, until I'd completely lost my sense of direction. The study is quite simple, he explained as we walked. We're examining the effects of isolation and routine on decision, making, and emotional regulation. You'll spend 2 weeks in a controlled environment, following a structured schedule. We'll conduct periodic assessments and interviews. At the end, you'll receive your compensation, and you're free to leave.
That's it?
That's it, he smiled. We find that most participants discover the experience quite enlightening. Many report feeling clarified afterward. He showed me to my room. Calling it a room was generous. It was a cell, though they'd obviously tried to make it seem otherwise. White walls, white floor, white ceiling, a narrow bed with white sheets, a small white desk and chair, a door that I noticed immediately had no handle on the inside. The door operates on a magnetic lock, Dr. Reeves explained, following my gaze. For safety reasons. You have a call button if you need anything. Meals are delivered at set times. Bathroom facilities are accessed through there. He indicated a door I hadn't noticed, also white, also handleless. When can I leave? In 2 weeks, as agreed. Unless you wish to terminate your participation early, though that would unfortunately forfeit your compensation. His smile never wavered. I'll leave you to settle in. Your first session begins in 1 hour. The door closed behind him with a soft, final click. I wish I could say I ran then, that I pressed the call button and demanded to be let out. But I didn't. I sat on the bed and thought about $15,000, and I told myself 2 weeks wasn't that long. The first session was in another white room, this one containing only 2 chairs facing each other. Dr. Reeves sat across from me with a clipboard. Let's begin with something simple, he said. Tell me about yourself, Daniel. Start from your earliest memory and work forward. Take your time. Be thorough. I talked for what felt like hours. He never interrupted, just nodded occasionally and made notes. When I finally ran out of things to say, he smiled. Excellent. Same time tomorrow. You may return to your room now. The routine established itself quickly. Wake at 6 a.m. when the lights automatically brightened. Breakfast delivered through a slot in the door at 6:30. Always the same, oatmeal and fruit. Session with Dr. Reeves at 8 a.m., where I continued my autobiography, working chronologically through my life. Lunch at noon. Exercise period in a small white gym at 2 p.m. Dinner at 6 p.m. Lights out at 10 p.m. No windows. No clock except the one in the gym. No entertainment. No books. No stimulation of any kind, except the sessions with Dr. Reeves. By day 3, I was going stir crazy. The sameness was suffocating. The whiteness of everything made my eyes hurt. I found myself looking forward to the sessions just to have something, anything to do. You're adapting well. Dr. Reeves noted, your resistance is decreasing. That's natural. Resistance to what? To the process. All participants resist at first. The human ego clings to its narratives, its sense of self. But with time and proper guidance, we can strip away the unnecessary layers, reveal the truth beneath. I didn't like how he said, "Strip away," but I nodded and continued talking about my failed relationship with Sarah, my dead-end job at the warehouse, my slow slide into debt. On day 5, they brought clippers. "We're beginning the next phase," Dr. Reeves explained. "Physical uniformity. It helps participants focus inward rather than on superficial identifiers. We'll need you to shave your head, your facial hair, and your body hair. Completely." That wasn't in the agreement. Section 7, subsection C. Participants agree to follow all protocols deemed necessary by research staff. Would you like me to bring you a copy of the contract? I knew what I'd find if he did. Dense legal language I'd barely skimmed. I took the clippers. It took hours. When I finished and looked in the mirror, I barely recognized myself. Without my hair, without my beard, I looked alien, exposed, vulnerable. "Excellent," Dr. Reeves said when he saw me. "Now we can begin the real work." The sessions changed. Instead of talking about my past, I was given exercises. Meditation, he called it, though it felt more like induced trance. Sitting perfectly still for hours while Dr. Reeves's voice washed over me, steady and hypnotic, describing who I was, what I wanted, what I believed. Except the person he described wasn't me, or wasn't the me I'd known. This version of Daniel Morrison was calm, obedient, focused. This Daniel Morrison didn't question authority. This Daniel Morrison understood that individual desires were less important than collective purpose. I tried to argue, at first, to assert my own identity. But it's hard to argue with a voice that never raises, never gets angry, just patiently corrects you like a teacher with a slow student. And I was so tired. The lack of stimulation, the endless whiteness, the routine, it wore me down like water on stone. By day 8, I realized I'd stopped thinking about the outside world. I couldn't remember what day of the week it was. Couldn't remember what season. Time had become meaningless. Just an endless cycle of wake, eat, listen, obey, sleep. "You're progressing beautifully," Dr. Reeves said. "Your autonomic responses are normalizing. Your cortisol levels are stable. You're learning. Learning what? To submit, to let go, to accept." The food portions had been getting smaller. I'd noticed, but hadn't questioned it. Questioning took energy I didn't have. By day 9, I was lightheaded and weak, and when I mentioned it during a session, Dr. Reeves nodded approvingly. Physical discipline enhances mental discipline. You're being refined, Daniel. All the excess, all the unnecessary parts of you, they're being carefully removed. What remains will be pure, perfect, useful, something in that word useful, pierced through the fog in my mind. Useful for what? He smiled. For your purpose, Daniel. The reason you're here. The reason we selected you. I thought this was a psychology study. Did you? He tilted his head. Or is that simply what you needed to believe? Tell me, Daniel. What do you remember about your intake interview? I tried to think back, but it was like grasping at smoke. Had there been questions beyond the basic screening? Had someone assessed me for something other than availability? You scored very highly on our susceptibility index. Dr. Reeves continued. Excellent capacity for behavioral modification, minimal family attachments, significant financial desperation, no strong ideological commitments. You're exactly what we look for. For what? Operators, agents, tools. He said it so casually, as if it were obvious. The Behavioral Sciences Institute has been cultivating individuals like you for 17 years. We provide a very specialized service to various corporate and governmental entities. They give us their problems. A whistle. Blower who needs to be discredited. A researcher whose work threatens certain interests. A journalist who's asking uncomfortable questions. And we give them you. The room spun. You're training assassins. Nothing so crude. We're training people to destroy lives without breaking laws. To gaslight. To sabotage. To undermine. You'll be placed in a target's life as a friend, a colleague, a lover, and you'll systematically dismantle their credibility, their sanity, their sense of reality. And you'll do it willingly, happily, because by the time we're finished with you, you'll have no self left to resist. You'll be what we made you. I stood, or tried to. My legs barely supported me. I want out. Now, of course you do. That's the part of you we haven't finished erasing yet. But we will, Daniel. We have 6 more days, and then you'll be ready for your first assignment. I won't do it. You will. Everyone does. Do you want to know why? He leaned forward. Because by the time we're done, you won't remember that you didn't want to. You won't remember being anyone other than who we tell you you are. The man named Danny Morrison, who made bad choices and needed money. He's already disappearing. Can you even clearly picture his face? I realized with horror that I couldn't. The mirror had been removed from my room on day 6. I hadn't seen my reflection since. Tonight's session will be longer, Dr. Reeves said. We're accelerating your progression. By morning, you'll be much more receptive. The door opened behind him. 2 orderlies entered, large men in white uniforms. I thought about fighting, but my body wouldn't respond. Malnutrition, exhaustion, days of psychological conditioning. I was already beaten. They led me to a different room. This one had a medical chair, the kind dentists use, with restraints. They strapped me in gently, professionally. Dr. Reeves appeared with a syringe. This will help you relax, help you listen, help you become. The needle stung. Warmth spread through my veins. The room began to blur and shift. And then the voice started. Not Dr. Reeves this time, but a recording played on loop. A calm, measured voice describing who I was, what I believed, what I would do, over and over. Hours, maybe days. Time stopped meaning anything. You are Daniel Morrison. You serve willingly. Your purpose is obedience. Individual identity is illusion. You will complete your assignments without question. You will not remember this training. You will believe you chose this freely. You are a tool. You are useful. You are ours. Something inside me screamed. Some small, bright part that was still me. Still Danny, the kid who'd grown up in Queens. who'd loved his mom before she died, who'd once dreamed of being an architect. That part of me fought. And somehow, impossibly, it held on. I don't know how long I was in that chair. When they finally released me, I could barely walk. They half carried me back to my room and laid me on the bed. I heard the door lock. I lay there in the dark, trying to hold on to myself, trying to remember. Danny Morrison, 26 years old, from Queens. Mom died when I was 16. Dad left before that. I had a goldfish once named Pepper. Sarah left me because I couldn't commit. I worked at Marshall's warehouse. I owed Marcus Delgado $8,000. Small facts, small truths. I repeated them like a mantra, anchoring myself. When the lights came on at 6 a.m., I had a plan. It wasn't a good plan, but it was all I had. I pretended. When they brought breakfast, I ate calmly. When Dr. Reeves came for our session, I sat with perfect posture and answered his questions in a monotone. I was obedient. I was compliant. I was what they wanted me to be. Remarkable progress, Dr. Reeves said, genuine pleasure in his voice. Daniel, you're ready ahead of schedule. Tomorrow we'll brief you on your first assignment. I nodded. No expression. No resistance. That night, when dinner came through the slot, I didn't eat it. I saved the plastic fork, snapping off the handle to create a thin, sharp edge. Not much of a weapon, but enough. At 20:17 a.m., I'd been counting seconds, teaching myself to track time again. I pressed the call button, and I kept pressing it. Over and over, an emergency signal. When the orderly arrived, I was slumped on the floor, convulsing. He entered quickly, concerned. The door swung open behind him. I drove the plastic shard into his thigh. Not deep enough to really injure, but enough to hurt, enough to shock. As he stumbled back, I ran. The corridors were a maze, but I ran anyway, choosing turns at random. Behind me, alarms started blaring. Footsteps. Shouts. I found stairs and took them up. And up. And up. The building was bigger than I'd realized. Floor after floor after floor. How many people were being conditioned here? How many Daniels were being erased? A door. Heavy. Marked emergency exit only. I slammed through it. Night air. Real, cold, beautiful night air. A roof flat and wide. I could see the city spread out below, lights and life and reality. Dr. Reeves emerged from the stairwell behind me. Alone. Calm. Always calm. Daniel, this is disappointing. You were doing so well. My name is Danny. Danny Morrison. And I remember who I am. Do you? He walked closer. Are you sure? After everything we've shown you about yourself? About how easily you can be reshaped. Even if you leave here, even if you go to the police, what will you tell them? That you voluntarily enrolled in a research study and now regret it. That you're accusing a respected institution of crimes based on nothing but your word. People will believe me. Will they? You're in debt to a loan shark, Daniel. Sorry, Danny. You're desperate, unstable. And I'm a doctor with 17 years of published research and impeccable credentials. Who sounds more credible? He was right, and he knew it. But he'd made a mistake. He'd come up here alone. Pride. maybe. Arrogance. The certainty that I was already broken. I took a step back, then another, moving toward the edge of the roof. Daniel, don't be dramatic. Come back inside. We can work through this. We can help you understand. I jumped. Not off the building, onto the fire escape that I'd spotted while he was talking. The metal clanged under my impact, and I scrambled down, taking the rusty stairs 3 at a time. Above me, Dr. Reeves appeared at the edge, watching. Not following, just watching. I hit the ground running, barefoot in thin cotton scrubs. I ran through the industrial district until my lungs burned and my feet blood. When I finally stopped, hiding behind a dumpster in an alley, the sun was starting to rise. I eventually made it to a police station. They listened to my story with skeptical expressions. When they went to the address I gave them, they found an empty building. No Behavioral Sciences Institute. No Dr. Reeves. No white rooms. Just vacant floors and a "for lease" sign. Either they'd moved that quickly, or... And this thought still haunts me. I'd been somewhere else entirely. Somewhere that didn't officially exist. The officer who interviewed me suggested I might have been involved with a cult. He gave me a pamphlet on deprogramming services and a card for a psychiatrist. I could tell he thought I was lying, or crazy, or both. Maybe I am crazy. Maybe the whole thing was a hallucination, a breakdown, a complicated delusion. That would almost be comforting. But every time I look in the mirror, I still see a stranger's face. Without my hair, without the identifying markers of who I was, I don't quite recognize myself. I've grown my hair back now, but it doesn't help. That feeling of being fundamentally altered, fundamentally hollowed out, it persists. And sometimes, late at night, I find myself thinking in that calm, measured tone. Thinking thoughts that don't feel like mine. Following urges toward behaviors I know are wrong, but that seem, in the moment, perfectly logical. I'll be walking down the street and suddenly, I'm analyzing everyone I see, assessing their vulnerabilities, their weaknesses, thinking about how easily I could insert myself into their lives and destroy them from within. That's when I know they're still in my head. That part of the conditioning took. Not enough to control me, but enough to have changed something fundamental about who I am. I never got the $15,000. I still owe Marcus Delgado, though I've managed to negotiate a payment plan by doing work for him. I don't ask too many questions about the work. Turns out I'm good at it. Finding things people don't want found, convincing people to do things they normally wouldn't. Turns out the Institute taught me something useful after all. Sometimes I wonder if that was their plan all along. That they knew I'd escape. That they knew I'd be incomplete, damaged but functional, changed but not completely broken. That they'd created something useful even in failure. Sometimes, I wonder how many others like me are out there. How many people who answered desperate ads and came out different, changed, weaponized just enough to be dangerous. And sometimes, in my darkest moments, I wonder if I ever really escaped at all. if everything after that roof. The police station, my life now. This growing comfort with doing terrible things for money is exactly what they programmed me for. If Danny Morrison died in that white room, and what walks around in his skin now is exactly what Dr. Reeves intended to create, I'll never know for certain. That's the real horror of it. They took my certainty. They taught me that identity is fragile. That self is negotiable. That with the right pressure, anyone can become anyone. Even yourself into someone you don't recognize. I look at my hands now, these hands that have learned to manipulate and deceive. Are they my hands, or the Institute's? Is anything I do truly my choice, or am I forever running programs they installed? The question keeps me awake, every night, in the dark, wondering who I am, wondering if I'll ever really know, wondering if maybe that's the point, if maybe the real conditioning wasn't making me obedient. It was making me doubt myself so thoroughly that I could never trust my own mind again. And if that's true, then they're still winning, still in control, still there in every thought, every choice, every moment of uncertainty. I am Danny Morrison. I think, I believe, I hope, but I'll never be completely sure. Story 5. I've spent 15 years cataloging death. That sounds more macabre than it is. I'm a natural history archivist, specializing in taxidermy specimens from the Victorian era. My job is to preserve the preserved, to maintain the glass eyes and careful stitching that keeps extinct species visible to future generations. I thought I'd seen every variation of the taxidermist's art. I was wrong. The call came in March. A lawyer representing the estate of Cornelius Ashford, recently deceased, needed someone to inventory his private collection. The pay was extraordinary. 3 months' salary for 2 weeks' work. The location was remote, a private estate in northern Scotland. Accommodation provided, all expenses paid. I should have asked more questions. Why such generous compensation? Why the urgency? Why me specifically? But I didn't. I accepted, booked my flight, and told myself this would be the career opportunity I'd been waiting for. Cornelius Ashford was legendary in natural history circles, a collector whose acquisition of rare specimens was matched only by his secrecy about them. His collection had never been viewed by outside scholars. To have first access to catalogued pieces no one else had seen was an honor. The estate was exactly what you'd expect. Ancient stone, Gothic architecture, positioned on a cliff overlooking the North Sea. Beautiful and isolated in equal measure. The caretaker, a silent man named Mackenzie, showed me to my room and handed me a key ring. "The gallery is through the east wing," he said. His Scottish accent was thick, his manner brusque. "Mr. Ashford's study is locked. The key's on there, but the lawyer said you're not to enter until you've completed the initial inventory. Everything's to be documented exactly as you find it. As there a catalogue, notes, any previous inventory." Mackenzie's expression was unreadable. "You'll find everything you need in the gallery. Dinner's at 7. Keep to your schedule." The house has peculiarities. He left before I could ask what that meant. I found the gallery the next morning. The double doors were mahogany, ornately carved with scenes of hunts and harvests. I unlocked them and stepped inside. The space took my breath away. A vast hall with vaulted ceilings, lit by massive windows overlooking the sea, and displayed throughout, in custom-built glass cases, were the most extraordinary taxidermy specimens I'd ever encountered. But something was wrong. I felt it immediately, a wrongness I couldn't yet articulate. The specimens were too perfect, too alive. The traditional signs of taxidermy, the slight stiffness, the unnatural positioning, the subtle imperfections, were absent. I approached the first case, a red fox, captured mid-leap, its body twisted in the dynamic curve of a predator's pounce. Every muscle was defined, every hair in place. Its glass eyes held a reflection of light that seemed almost conscious. The placard read, "Red fox, vulpes vulpes," captured at the precise moment of prey acquisition. Natural moment number 1, March 15, 1997, captured, not prepared, not mounted. Captured. I moved to the next case. A rabbit in full sprint, ears back, legs extended, frozen in the desperate flight from predators. The expression in its eyes was pure terror, perfectly preserved. Cottontail rabbit, Silvilagus floridinus, captured at the precise moment of predator evasion. Natural moment number 2, March 15, 1997, the same date, the same strange language, captured at the precise moment. I spent hours moving through the gallery, documenting each specimen, and with each one, my unease grew. They were all captured at moments of extreme behavior. A hawk striking, a deer leaping, a snake coiling to strike. Moments of violence, fear, desperation, and they were all impossibly perfect, as if time itself had stopped mid-motion. By late afternoon, I documented 53 specimens, all dated within the last 30 years, all using that same phrase, captured at the precise moment. Then I reached the back of the gallery and found the specimens without placards. They were covered with dark cloth, these cases, 7 of them larger than the others. I hesitated, my hand on the first cloth, some instinct warning me to stop. But I'm a scientist. Curiosity is both profession and compulsion. I pulled the cloth away. The woman inside was middle-aged, dressed in hiking clothes from perhaps the 1980s. She was running, captured mid-stride, her face turned to look behind her, and her expression, God, her expression, was absolute terror. Not the simplified fear you see in wax museums, but the complex, genuine horror of someone fleeing for their life. Her skin had the wrong texture, too perfect, too preserved. But her eyes looked wet with tears that would never fall. My hands shook as I moved to the next covered case. A man in hunting gear, rifle raised, his body twisted in the act of aiming. His face showed shock, the realization of predator becoming prey. The next, a young couple. Their bodies positioned as if running together, hands reaching for each other, but not quite touching. Their faces held matching expressions of desperate hope. They weren't taxidermy. They couldn't be. The skin, The eyes. The subtle variations in color and texture. These weren't recreations. These were bodies. Real human bodies, somehow preserved in the exact moment of their death. I ran from the gallery. Mackenzie found me in the courtyard, doubled over and hyperventilating. "You found the special ones, then," he said quietly. "Those are people. Real people. Murdered people. That they are. Or were. Depending on how you look at it." I stared at him. "You knew. You knew, and you said nothing." "Said nothing to who?" "The police came years ago. Investigated Mr. Ashford thoroughly. Found nothing. Because there's nothing to find, legally speaking. Those people." He nodded toward the gallery. "They're not dead. Not technically." "What the hell does that mean?" Mackenzie sat on the stone bench, suddenly looking very old. Cornelius Ashford was a genius. Worked in physics, biology, chemistry, half a dozen fields. His particular obsession was time, stopping it specifically, preserving moments perfectly without corruption or decay. That's impossible. Is it? Then how do you explain what you saw? Those specimens, they're not dead and preserved. They're alive and stopped. Every molecule, every cell, every electrical impulse, frozen at the exact instant Ashford triggered his device. Time stopped for them. Just stopped. They're not aging, not decaying. They're existing in a perpetual present that will never become past. The implications crashed over me. The animals, too. Everything in that gallery is in the same state. Conscious, aware, experiencing that single moment forever. The fox feels the thrill of the hunt eternally. The rabbit feels the terror of escape eternally. And the people? He trailed off. The people feel whatever they felt in their last moment. Forever. I felt sick. How many? 7 humans. Hundreds of animals. He'd been working on the process for decades, perfecting it. The early attempts failed. You'll find those in the basement, things that are half stopped, half decayed. Abominations. But he got better. More precise. By the end, he could stop a moment so cleanly, you'd think you could just restart it. Why? Why would anyone do this? Mackenzie's smile was bitter. Because he was dying. Cancer. He had maybe 6 months when he started this final phase of his work. He wanted to preserve himself, you see. Freeze himself in a moment before the disease could take him. But he needed to perfect the technique first. Needed test subjects. So he murdered people. Not murder legally. He created scenarios, accidents, confrontations, situations where people were already in mortal danger. He just made sure that danger became eternal instead of fatal. The woman? She was attacked by a bear on his property. He stopped her in the moment before it would have killed her. The hunter, about to be gored by a wounded stag. The couple, cliff collapse. He saved them, in a sense. Trapped them in the instant before death, rather than letting them die. That's insane. Insane or not, he did it. And he documented everything. His study contains all his research, all his notes. The mechanism he used, how it works, what it does. The lawyer wants you to inventory the collection, because Ashford left specific instructions. He wants his work to be understood, wants someone to appreciate the magnitude of what he achieved. I won't do it. I won't be part of this. Then you'll leave unpaid and traumatized, and nothing will change. The collection will sit here. Those people will remain frozen, and Ashford's work will eventually be rediscovered by someone else, someone who might not have your scruples. Mackenzie leaned forward. Or you can finish the job. Document everything. Give those people names, identities, stories. At least let them be remembered for who they were, not just as exhibits. I wanted to refuse. Wanted to call the police, the press, anyone. But Mackenzie was right. The police had already investigated. And what law had been broken? How do you prosecute the imprisonment of people who are neither alive nor dead? I went back to the gallery. Working among those frozen forms was the most difficult thing I've ever done. Each specimen required detailed documentation, measurements, photographs, condition notes. For the animals, it was manageable. For the humans, it was torture. I had to photograph their faces, had to measure their bodies, had to look into their frozen eyes and see the eternal moment they were experiencing. The young couple broke me. I found their identifications in Ashford's study later. Thomas and Margaret Wright, 24 and 23. Newlyweds hiking the estate with permission. The cliff they'd been standing on had collapsed. Ashford had frozen them mid-fall, mid-reach, forever trying to save each other, forever failing. I wept while documenting them. Wept while taking notes on the positioning of their fingers, the angle of their bodies, the eternal hope in their eyes. The study was worse than the gallery. Ashford's journals detailed everything. The theory behind his time-stopping field. The mathematics that made it possible. The biology of temporal stasis. And most horrifying, the subjective experience of those caught within it. They were conscious. Fully, completely conscious. Unable to move. Unable to think beyond the single thought they'd been having at the moment of freezing, but aware, experiencing that one instant forever, that one sensation, that one emotion in an endless loop with no beginning and no end. The fox felt the joy of the hunt eternally. The rabbit felt terror eternally. The woman running from the bear felt desperation eternally. Thomas and Margaret Wright felt love and hope and fear eternally, half forever reaching, forever falling. And Ashford had known, had documented their subjective experiences through some method I didn't fully understand, had noted that the initial test subjects eventually achieved a kind of meditation, a acceptance of their eternal moment. But some never did. Some remained in agony, in fear, in suffering that would never end. He'd written about this clinically, scientifically, as if the ethical implications didn't exist. The final entry in his journal was dated 2 days before his death. The mechanism is perfected. Tomorrow I will take my place in my own gallery. I have chosen my moment carefully. The instant of reaching the summit of Ben Nevis at sunrise, 30 years ago. The happiest moment of my life, the instant I knew true peace. That moment will become my eternity. I will exist in that perfect instant forever, and I will be content. There was a map with the entry, showing the location in the gallery where he intended to place himself. I went there with a horrible certainty of what I'd find. The case was the largest, positioned to catch the morning light. The cloth covering it was pristine, untouched. I pulled it away. Cornelius Ashford stood on a painted mountain summit, arms raised in triumph, his face tilted toward an artificial sun. He was younger in this frozen moment, healthy, full of vigor. His expression was transcendent joy. But his eyes, oh God, his eyes, they held madness. Absolute, complete madness. Because while his face showed joy, his eyes showed the realization, the terrible, eternal realization that he'd made a mistake, that the moment he'd chosen wasn't peace. It was the instant of recognizing his own doom, the instant of understanding that he'd trapped himself not in happiness, but in the eternal awareness of his own consciousness, locked forever in a single second with no escape, no death, no end. He'd frozen himself in hell. I stared at him for a long time, this man who'd been so certain he could engineer eternity, who'd thought he could trap happiness like a butterfly in glass. Instead, he'd created his own prison and locked himself inside forever. Mackenzie found me there hours later. "You understand now," he said. It wasn't a question. What happens to them? To all of them? Nothing. They exist. They'll exist long after we're gone, after this house crumbles, after the sun goes cold. Ashford made sure of that. The temporal stasis doesn't require power, doesn't degrade. It simply is. Forever. Someone has to destroy this. The device, the mechanism, everything. Can't be done. Ashford made sure of that too. The fields are self-sustaining. Trying to break them would either fail or catastrophically expand them. The physics are beyond me, but the result is clear. They're permanent. I finished the inventory that night. Worked until dawn, documenting every specimen, every frozen moment, every trapped soul. Not because the lawyer required it, but because someone needed to bear witness. Someone needed to remember that these weren't just exhibits. They were people, animals, living things caught in amber. I included everything in my report. The humans, their identities, Ashford's journals, the mechanism's specifications, the ethical implications. I sent copies to the police, to the British Museum, to ethics boards and scientific journals. Nothing happened. The police reiterated their previous findings. No crime had been committed. The people were technically alive, therefore not murdered. The scientific journals rejected it as too extraordinary to be credible. The ethics boards had no framework for addressing the imprisonment of consciousness in temporal stasis. The collection remains. I'm told they've opened it to researchers now, with appropriate non-disclosure agreements. Ashford's gallery of natural moments, a testament to human genius and human horror in equal measure. I left Scotland with my payment and my nightmares. The dreams come every night. I'm in a glass case, frozen mid-motion, aware but unable to move, experiencing the same instant forever. Sometimes I'm running. Sometimes I'm falling. Sometimes I'm reaching for someone I love, my fingers forever inches from theirs. I wake gasping, checking my ability to move, to breathe, to exist in time that actually progresses. But here's what truly haunts me: the thought I can't escape. How do I know I'm not in one of Ashford's cases right now? How do I know that this moment, typing these words, feeling this fear, isn't the instant he chose for me? That I'm not experiencing this same second over and over, thinking I'm progressing through time, when really I'm trapped in an eternal loop, forever documenting, forever remembering, forever haunted. How would I know? If time stopped at this instant, would I perceive it? Or would my consciousness just repeat the same thoughts, the same fears, the same words, believing each repetition to be a new moment, when really it's the same moment, experienced infinitely? That's the true horror of Ashford's work. Not the freezing itself, but the uncertainty. The knowledge that at any instant, time could stop, and you'd never know. You'd just exist in that frozen now, thinking you were living, experiencing, progressing, when really you'd be trapped forever in a single second. I could be trapped right now. You could be trapped reading this. We could all be trapped in our own eternal moments, our consciousnesses running in circles, believing we're alive when we're really in stasis, and we'd never know. Time would feel like it was passing. Days would seem to follow nights. But it would all be illusion, consciousness replaying the same instant, interpreting it as duration when it's really eternal present. I look at the clock on my wall, watching the seconds tick by. But how do I know they're real seconds? How do I know I'm not just repeating the same thought over and over? Look at the clock. Look at the clock. In an instant that never ends. I don't. I can't. None of us can. That's what Ashford's gallery taught me. That time is more fragile than we think. That the line between moment and eternity is thinner than we imagine. And that somewhere in Scotland, in a gallery overlooking the sea, hundreds of consciousnesses exist in their private eternities, each experiencing their own infinite now, including perhaps mine, including perhaps yours. After all, how would we know? Story 6. My name is Eleanor Winters, and I killed my garden 3 years ago. Not intentionally, not all at once, but through neglect, through distraction, through the slow erosion of care that happens when life becomes too loud and work becomes too demanding. I'm a botanist by training, which makes the irony particularly sharp. I spent my days studying plant genetics in a sterile laboratory, while the garden my grandmother left me withered and died. The garden had been her pride. 2 acres of carefully cultivated beds, rare specimens collected over 50 years. Each plant labeled with neat handwritten tags that included not just the Latin names but stories. From Margaret's garden, 1967. Cutting taken the spring before Thomas died. Seeds saved from the old house, when she passed and left it to me. I promised I would maintain it, I lasted 6 months before the demands of my career consumed everything else. By the end of the first year, weeds had taken over. By the second, most of the perennials had succumbed. By the third, it was just a tangle of wild growth that bore no resemblance to what it had been. I felt the guilt every time I looked out the kitchen window. But guilt doesn't pull weeds or prune roses. Guilt just sits heavy in your chest and whispers that you've failed someone who trusted you. Then the package arrived. No return address. Just a small wooden box wrapped in brown paper. My name and address written in handwriting that looked oddly like my grandmother's, though that was impossible. Inside were seeds, dozens of them, each in a small envelope made of old paper that felt like parchment. The envelopes had labels, but not the kind my grandmother used. These were written in a language I didn't recognize. The letters looked almost like Latin, but wrong, shifted, like looking at familiar text through distorted glass. There was a note, written in English on the same strange parchment. For Eleanor. To restore what was lost. Plant them in the secret garden at dusk. Water them with regret. They will grow. The secret garden. That's what my grandmother had called the oldest part of her property. The section hidden behind a stone wall covered in ivy. It had been her favorite place, where she kept her most unusual specimens. I hadn't been back there since she died. I should have thrown the seeds away. Should have recognized that something about them was wrong. The too perfect preservation, the strange writing, the note that made no sense. But I was tired of the guilt, tired of seeing the ruined garden. And perhaps some part of me wanted to believe in easy solutions, in gifts that could undo damage through simple acts. That evening, as the sun began to set, I took the box and walked to the secret garden. The stone wall was still there, though the ivy had grown wild, nearly obscuring the old wooden door. It took me 10 minutes to find it, to pull away enough growth to see the rusted iron handle. The door resisted, swollen with damp and disuse, but eventually it gave way with a sound like a sigh. Inside, the secret garden was smaller than I remembered. Perhaps 30 feet across, circular, enclosed completely by the stone wall. The plants my grandmother had grown here were long dead, leaving only bare earth and a few skeletal stems. In the center was a stone birdbath that had gone dry, its basin filled with dead leaves. The light was fading fast, making everything look gray and flat. I knelt in the dirt and began to dig small holes with my hands. The soil was cold damp, with a texture that was almost soft, like flesh. I planted all the seeds, one by one, following a pattern I didn't consciously choose, but that felt right somehow. A circle, spiraling inward. As I worked, the note's strange instruction came back to me. Water them with regret. I sat back on my heels, looking at the freshly turned earth. Water them with regret. What did that even mean? But I felt it, didn't I? The regret. 3 years of it, accumulated like sediment. I thought about my grandmother's hands working this same soil. Thought about promises broken and care abandoned. And as I thought these things, I felt tears begin to fall. I didn't try to stop them. I let myself cry over the planted seeds. Let the tears fall onto the dark earth. Water them with regret. Perhaps that's all it meant. Perhaps grief and salt water were enough. When I finally stopped, it was nearly dark. I stood on stiff legs and walked back to the house without looking back. I didn't sleep well that night. My dreams were full of gardens, but wrong gardens. Gardens where things grew too fast, where plants had teeth, where roots pulled themselves from the soil and walked. I woke several times, sweating, convinced I could hear something growing. That wet, stretching sound of plant matter expanding. In the morning, I told myself I'd imagined it. Told myself the seeds would probably do nothing. They were likely dead, whatever they were. The whole thing was probably someone's strange idea of a joke. But when I looked out the kitchen window toward the stone wall, I could see something green rising above it. Something that definitely hadn't been there yesterday. I walked to the secret garden slowly, coffee cup in hand, telling myself it was just the ivy growing faster, just a trick of the light. But when I opened the wooden door, I dropped the cup. The garden was full of growth, impossibly full. The seeds I'd planted had sprouted and grown to maturity in a single night. But they weren't any plants I recognized. The closest ones looked almost like sunflowers, but their heads were too large, too heavy, and they tracked my movement as I stepped inside. Not just turning toward the sun, turning toward me, following me with something that felt like attention. Beyond them were vines that had already covered half the stone wall, but their leaves were the wrong color. Not green, but a deep purple that was almost black, and they seemed to pulse slightly, as if breathing. In the center, where the bird bath had been, something tall and white had grown. It looked like a tree, but its bark was smooth and pale like skin, and its branches moved in the still morning air with slow, deliberate motions. I should have run, should have called someone, but I was a botanist. I studied plants, and these were like nothing I'd ever seen or read about. I moved closer to one of the sunflower things. Its head swiveled to follow me, and I could see now that what I'd taken for seeds at its center were actually eyes. Human eyes. Dozens of them, all different colors, all blinking independently. I stumbled backward and nearly fell into a patch of what looked like ferns. But these ferns reached out toward me as I passed, their fronds ending in small hands that grasped at my clothing with surprising strength. The white tree in the center made a sound, a whisper like wind through leaves, but forming words I almost understood. "Eleanor, you planted us. You fed us. We are yours." I ran, got out of the secret garden, slammed the wooden door, and stood with my back against it, breathing hard. This wasn't real. Couldn't be real. Plants didn't have eyes, didn't have hands, didn't speak. But I could still hear them through the door. Growing, whispering, the sound of roots pushing through soil, of stems elongating, of leaves unfurling. I spent the day trying to rationalize what I'd seen, hallucination brought on by stress. Some kind of chemical in the seeds that caused vivid delusions. Anything but the obvious explanation that what I'd planted was growing and was fundamentally wrong. By evening, I could see the growth from my kitchen window. The plants had grown higher than the stone wall. The white tree was visible now, rising above everything else, its branches spreading like veins across the darkening sky. And there were sounds, not just growing sounds, but other things. Laughter that wasn't quite human. Crying that came from no recognizable throat. Music that had no source and followed no scale I knew. I locked all the doors and windows, drew all the curtains, tried to convince myself that morning would bring clarity, that I would figure out what to do. But at midnight, I heard knocking. Not on the door, on the window. The second floor window of my bedroom. I didn't want to look, didn't want to pull back the curtain, but the knocking was insistent, rhythmic, patient. It would continue until I acknowledged it. I looked. A vine had grown from the secret garden all the way to my window. A thick vine covered in those purple, black leaves that pulsed with breath or heartbeat. At its end, instead of flowers, was a face, human-ish, my grandmother's features, but made of plant matter, petals for lips, stamens for eyelashes, sepals forming the curve of a cheek. It smiled when it saw me. "Eleanor," it whispered through the glass. "Let me in. Let us in. We are the garden you abandoned. We are the growth you neglected. We are everything you should have tended returned. Let us in, and we will forgive you. You're not my grandmother. We are the seeds she saved, the specimens she collected, the life she cultivated. We are her work," continued. "We are what she left for you. And now we are ready to restore everything." Restore what? The face made of flowers tilted, considering. The garden, the way it was, the way it should be. But it needs more than soil and water now. It needs care, attention, devotion. It needs you, Eleanor. It needs you to tend it, to be part of it, to grow with it, to behind the vine, face. I could see other plants approaching the house. The sunflowers with their eye-filled heads. The ferns with grasping hands. Smaller things that skittered on root legs. All of them converging on my home. "I'm calling the police," I said. "And tell them what? That your garden is haunted. That the seeds you planted have grown into nightmares." The face smiled wider. "They will think you mad. They will take you away. And the garden will continue to grow. It will grow through your house, through your neighbors' houses, through the entire street. It will restore everything to green, to life, to the way things were before humans decided they could control nature. That's not restoration. That's invasion. Is there a difference? Your grandmother understood. She collected us, preserved us, waited for the right time to plant us. She knew you would be the one. Knew you would feel the guilt. Knew you would water us with your regret." The face pressed closer to the glass. "She made us for you, Eleanor. Made us to teach you what it means to truly tend a garden. Not to control it. To be part of it." The window began to crack. from pressure, but from growth. Tiny rootlets were working their way through the seal, spreading across the glass like veins. I ran downstairs, grabbed my car keys, headed for the front door. But when I opened it, the garden was already there. The lawn had transformed. What had been grass was now a carpet of that purple, black growth, rippling and moving like water. The sunflowers lined the path to my car, their eye-filled heads watching. And the white tree, the terrible white tree, had grown close enough that its branches now touched my roof. I slammed the door and locked it, though I knew locks wouldn't matter. The house creaked. I could hear growth inside the walls now. Could see hairline cracks forming in the plaster as roots pushed through from outside. The air smelled like soil and flowers and something else. Something like decay and birth mixed together. I went to my grandmother's study, the one room in the house I'd left exactly as she'd had it. Her books, her specimens, her notes. If there was an answer, it would be here. I searched frantically through her papers, her journals, looking for anything about unusual seeds, about special gardens about. I found it. A journal entry from 2 months before she died. The seeds arrived today. I knew they would come eventually. Every gardener who reaches my age, who has tended life with enough devotion, receives them. The ghost seeds. That's what they're called in the old texts. Seeds of plants that never were. Plants that exist in the spaces between. They offer a choice plant them and become part of something larger. Something that blurs the line between gardener and garden, or refuse them and stay separate, human alone. I wanted to plant them. God help me, I wanted to. But I'm old, and I'm tired, and I'm not sure I could handle what comes after. So I'll leave them for Eleanor. She's stronger than she knows. She's more dedicated to the science of life than to the living of it. Perhaps the ghost seeds will teach her the difference. If you're reading this, my dear, you've already planted them. You've already watered them with your regret. And now they're growing into what they were meant to be. Growing into what you need them to be. You have a choice now. The same choice I had. Fight them, burn them, try to destroy them, and you'll spend the rest of your life fighting. They'll always come back. They'll always grow. Because you fed them with your own grief, and that connection can't be broken. Or accept them. Let them grow. Let them teach you. Become part of the garden in truth, not just in title. It's not death. Don't think of it as death. It's transformation. It's becoming something that can never die, that lives in seasons and cycles, that knows the deep peace of roots in soil. I couldn't make that choice, but perhaps you can. The journal fell from my hands. Outside, the white tree's branches had covered my entire roof. Inside, I could see green shoots emerging from the walls, from the floors, from the ceiling. The vine with my grandmother's face appeared at the study window. "You found her words?" it said. "Do you understand now? Oh, she wanted me to become this, to become like you. She wanted you to choose. That's all any of us can do. Choose to remain separate and fight what's already part of you, or choose to accept it, to grow. I looked at my hands. There were green lines under my skin now. Not veins, but roots. They'd started when I'd watered the seeds with my tears. Started when I'd made that first connection. If I say yes, will I still be me? You'll be more than you. You'll be you and the garden, separate and together. It's hard to explain in human words. But yes, Eleanor, the part of you that thinks and remembers and loves, that stays. It just expands to include more. And if I say no, then you fight. And fighting means fire, poison, destruction. It means killing everything in the secret garden and beyond. It means burning down parts of yourself. You'll survive, probably. But you'll always feel that missing piece. You'll always regret what could have grown. I thought about my grandmother working in her garden. The peace she seemed to find there. The way she would stand with her hands in the soil and look completely content. Had she known, even then, what was possible? Had she been tempted? The roots under my skin spread further, not painful, just present, making their way through me with slow inevitability. I walked outside. The garden made a path for me, the purple, black growth parting like water. The sunflowers turned their eye, filled heads to watch. The white tree lowered a branch, and I saw it had fruit now. Fruit that looked like hearts, pulsing gently. I walked to the secret garden. The wooden door stood open. Inside, the space had expanded. It was no longer 30 feet across, but stretched beyond what should have been possible. Acre after acre of impossible plants, growing in twilight that came from no visible sun. In the center, where the white tree's trunk grew, there was a space, a hollow, just large enough for a person. This is where gardeners rest. The vine, Faith said. It had followed me, or perhaps it had always been here. Where they tend from within. Where they become the garden, and the garden becomes them. Your grandmother prepared this place. She wanted you to have it if you chose. If you were ready. I stepped closer. The hollow was lined with soft moss that glowed faintly. It looked comfortable, inviting. Will it hurt? No more than growing ever does. There's stretching, change, the discomfort of becoming something new, but not pain, never pain. The garden loves its tenders. It wouldn't harm you. I thought about my life before this, the laboratory, the sterile work, the distance I'd kept from everything living, the garden I'd let die through neglect, the guilt that had been eating me for 3 years. I thought about my grandmother's hands in the soil, about the peace of growing things, about roots connecting everything into a vast, living network. I made my choice. I stepped into the hollow of the white tree. The moss was soft beneath me, warm. The tree's bark closed around me gently, like an embrace. I felt roots extending from my body, or perhaps into my body. It was hard to tell the difference now. The transformation didn't hurt. It was like falling asleep and waking up at the same time. I felt myself expanding, my consciousness spreading through the garden. I was still Eleanor, still myself, but I was also more. I was the sunflowers, seeing through dozens of eyes. I was the purple vines, breathing in slow rhythm. I was the ferns with their grasping hands, feeling the texture of stone and soil. I was roots deep underground, connecting everything, communicating in chemical signals and electric pulses. And I was happy, more happy than I'd been in years, maybe ever. Time passed differently now. Days were blinks. Seasons were breaths. I grew and changed and tended the garden from within, the way my grandmother had wanted me to. Sometimes people came to the house. Social workers, concerned neighbors, eventually distant relatives. They found the house empty, overgrown. They called it abandoned, declared me missing. Eventually, they stopped coming. But sometimes someone else came, someone who felt the guilt my grandmother knew so well, someone who'd let something precious die through neglect, someone who needed to understand what it meant to truly tend life. And when they came, when they pushed through the ivy, covered wall, and entered the secret garden, they found a package waiting, a small wooden box wrapped in brown paper, inside seeds, and a note. For the one who needs to grow, plant them in the secret garden at dusk. Water them with regret. They will grow. And they always do. They always do. This is my gift to them, passed on from my grandmother, passed on from whoever came before her. This is how we gardeners teach. This is how we tend, from the inside, forever growing, forever green. Story 7. The letter arrived on a Tuesday, slipping through my mail slot like a whisper. I almost missed it among the rejection notices from academic journals and the passive, aggressive notes from my department chair about my underperforming research output. But the cream-colored envelope stood out, thick and expensive, addressed in fountain pen to Decare, Vivian Crenshaw, with a formality that made my skin prickle. Inside, a law firm I'd never heard of informed me that my grandmother had passed away 3 months prior, and that I was the sole beneficiary of her estate. The estate included a house at 1447 Rosewood Lane, along with all its contents. I sat at my kitchen table for a long time, holding that letter. I hadn't seen my grandmother since I was 7 years old. My mother never spoke about her, and when I asked as a child, she would go very quiet, her face taking on a quality like wax melting. Some distances, she'd say, are there for good reasons. Now my mother was 5 years gone herself, and my grandmother was a stranger who'd left me a house. I should have been suspicious. I should have questioned why she'd chosen me, why the notification came so late, why my mother had kept such careful distance. But I was drowning in student debt, facing a tenure review that looked increasingly grim, and living in a studio apartment where I could hear my neighbor's every breath through the walls. A house meant space, privacy, perhaps even a fresh start. The drive took 4 hours through increasingly rural landscape. Rosewood Lane turned out to be a narrow road that wound through dense woods, the kind of trees that seemed to lean inward, creating a tunnel of shadow even in afternoon light. The house stood at the end, separated from its nearest neighbor by half a mile of forest. It was larger than I'd expected. A Victorian structure with a wraparound porch and windows that caught the fading light like eyes half closed in thought. The paint was fresh, a soft gray-blue, and the garden, though overgrown, showed signs of careful cultivation. Roses climbed the porch railings, their blooms so dark they were almost black. The key was where the lawyer's letter said it would be, under the third flower pot from the left. It turned in the lock with a smooth click that suggested recent use. Of the first thing I noticed was the smell. Not decay or mustiness, as I might have expected from a house closed up for months, but something floral and faintly sweet, like lavender mixed with something else I couldn't quite place. Vanilla, perhaps, or almond. The second thing I noticed were the dolls. They were everywhere. On every surface, every shelf, arranged in clusters on the furniture, standing in corners, sitting on the stairs. Porcelain dolls with glass eyes and elaborate costumes, cloth dolls with button eyes and stitched smiles, wooden dolls with jointed limbs and painted faces. Dozens of them. Perhaps hundreds. I stood in the foyer, my hand still on the doorknob, and felt their eyes on me. Glass, button, painted. It didn't matter. They were all looking at me. "It's just dolls," I said aloud, and my voice sounded small in the large space. They're just dolls. But they weren't just dolls, were they? Each one was crafted with extraordinary care. The details were remarkable. Individual eyelashes, tiny fingernails, clothing with actual working buttonholes and real lace trim. Some of them had hair that looked disturbingly real, human even, in shades from platinum blonde to deep black. I moved through the house room by room, turning on lights, opening curtains. The furniture was old but well maintained. The hardwood floors gleaming. In the kitchen, I found the refrigerator stocked with fresh food. Milk with a date 2 days in the future. Bread that was soft when I pressed it. Fruit with no signs of age. Someone had been here recently. Someone had been taking care of the house. The dolls continued their silent observation from every room. In the parlor, a group of 12 sat arranged around a small table set for tea. In the library, they lined the shelves between books, their faces turned toward the door. In what must have been my grandmother's bedroom, they covered every surface, and the bed itself had a special display case at its foot containing a doll that looked oddly like a bride, her dress a confection of white silk and seed pearls. I chose a bedroom at the opposite end of the hall for myself, a smaller room that had only 3 dolls, a mercy by comparison. I moved them to the closet, facing the wall, and told myself I was being ridiculous. That first night, I lay in an unfamiliar bed, listening to an unfamiliar house settle around me. Old houses make noises. I knew this. The creak of wood expanding and contracting. The tick of cooling radiators. The whisper of wind through gaps I hadn't yet found and sealed. But these sounds seemed to have pattern. Rhythm. Like footsteps moving through distant rooms. Like whispers too soft to make out words. I told myself I was imagining it. Stress, exhaustion, the strangeness of the situation. All perfectly rational explanations for a mind playing tricks. Then I heard the laughter. It came from downstairs, high and bright, the laughter of a child delighted by something. I sat up in bed. My heart suddenly loud in my ears. The sound came again, definitely laughter, definitely from inside the house. I made myself get up, made myself walk to the door, open it, step into the hallway. The sounds had stopped. The house was silent except for my own breathing, harsh in the darkness. I went back to bed. I did not sleep. Morning brought a kind of relief, the ordinary sunshine, making everything seem more reasonable. I made coffee in the well, a pointed kitchen, ate some of the mysteriously fresh fruit, and decided to explore more thoroughly. The house had 3 floors. I'd seen the main floor and the second floor of bedrooms. Now I looked for access to the attic and found a pull-down ladder in the ceiling of the upstairs hallway. But when I climbed up, I found only empty space, clean and dust-free, with no dolls at all. The absence felt wrong somehow, like a held breath. I was climbing back down when I noticed the door. It was in the hallway, painted the same color as the walls, without a doorknob, just a keyhole. I'd walked past it multiple times without really seeing it. Now I pressed my hand against it and felt a coolness that didn't match the rest of the house. I looked for the key all morning, searched drawers and boxes, checked under things, ran my hands along the tops of door frames. Nothing. The keyhole remained dark and empty, and the door stayed closed. It was late afternoon when I heard the knock. I opened the front door to find a woman in her 70s, round and comfortable, looking, with white hair in soft curls and a cardigan despite the warm day. She was holding a casserole dish. "You must be Vivian," she said, her smile warm. "I'm Mrs. Peyton from down the lane. I thought you might like a proper meal, settling in and all. I'm so sorry about your grandmother. She was quite a woman." Something in the way she said it made me pause. But I took the casserole and invited her in. Mrs. Peyton moved through the house with the ease of familiarity, settling herself in the parlor where the 12 dolls still sat at their eternal tea party. She didn't seem bothered by them at all. "I've been looking after the place," she said. "Keeping the garden, stocking the fridge, that sort of thing. Your grandmother left instructions and payment," she added quickly, as if I might object. She was very particular about keeping everything just so. "She died 3 months ago," I said carefully, "but the food in the fridge." "I was here Monday," Mrs. Peyton said. "We all hoped you'd come. She said you would, eventually. Said you'd be the one." "The one for what?" I wanted to ask, but Mrs. Peyton was looking at the dolls now, her expression fond. She made them all herself, you know. Every single one. It was her art, she called it. Her life's work. Each one took months, sometimes years. The detail, the care she put into them, they're really quite remarkable. They're very, I searched for a word, lifelike. Oh yes. Mrs. Peyton agreed, and something in her tone made me look at her sharply. But her face remained pleasant, unremarkable. Very lifelike indeed. You should see the basement. That's where she did her work. Where the really special ones are kept. I felt cold despite the warm room. The basement. Through the door upstairs. The one without a handle. She left you the key, of course. It'll be somewhere significant. She loved her little puzzles. Your grandmother. Mrs. Peyton left soon after, pressing my hand with her soft, warm one. "Welcome home, dear," she said. "I think you'll find everything you need here." Your grandmother made sure of it. I watched her walk down the path, her cardigan bright against the dark trees, and realized I hadn't asked her anything useful. How had my grandmother died? What had she been like? Why had she cut herself off from her family? The door without a handle. The key somewhere significant. I thought about it all through dinner, eating Mrs. Peyton's casserole at the kitchen table while dolls watched from the windowsill. Then I went to my grandmother's bedroom. The bride doll in the case drew my attention immediately. She was the most elaborate of all the dolls, her dress a masterpiece of tiny stitches and delicate lace. Her face had a strange quality, more realistic than the others, almost photographic in its detail. Her eyes were a particular shade of blue, gray, and something about them nagged at me. I opened the case carefully. The doll was heavier than I expected, solid and warm from the late afternoon, sun through the window. Around her neck was a thin chain with a single key. My hand trembled as I lifted it off. The key was old brass, small enough for that hallway door. As I held it, I caught my reflection in the mirror above the vanity. The bride doll's eyes were the exact color of mine. I should have stopped then. Should have put the key back, left the house. Called the lawyer and said I didn't want any of it. But we never do the sensible thing in these moments, do we? We tell ourselves we need to know. We convince ourselves that knowledge, however terrible, is better than uncertainty. I climbed the stairs to the second floor. The hallway was darker than it should have been, shadows gathering in corners despite the lights I'd turned on. The door waited smooth and blank. The key slid in easily. The lock clicked with a sound like a sigh. Cold air rushed up from below, carrying that sweet floral scent much stronger now, underlaid with something chemical. Formaldehyde, I realized, and other things. Things I recognized from my brief stint in a biology lab during my undergraduate years. Preservation chemicals. There were stairs leading down, lit by dim bulbs in wire cages. I made myself descend. The basement was not what I expected. It wasn't dark or dank. It was, in fact, pristinely clean, with white, painted walls and bright fluorescent lights. Workbenches lined the space, covered with tools I didn't recognize. Jars and bottles filled shelves. And along the far wall, in glass cases like museum displays, were the special dolls Mrs. Peyton had mentioned. 20 of them, maybe more, all life-sized, all perfect. All wrong. I moved closer, my breath coming short. These weren't dolls. Or rather, they weren't just dolls. The skin had a quality that porcelain couldn't match. The hair grew from actual scalps. The eyes, behind glass lenses, had the depth and variation of real human eyes. There was a man in a suit, his face frozen in an expression of mild surprise. A young woman in a sundress, her hands positioned as if she were about to clap. A teenage boy in a basketball uniform. Each one was perfect. Each one was real. And each one had a small brass plaque on their display case with a name and dates. Margaret Thorne, 1952-1953. David Reeves, 1967-1968. Sarah Chen, 1989-1990. The dates were all approximately 1 year apart. 1 year from disappearance to completion. I felt my stomach turn. On the central workbench, I found my grandmother's journals. Decades of them, filled with neat handwriting and technical drawings. I didn't want to read them. I knew I would anyway. She'd been working on the process for 50 years, perfecting it. The preservation of the human form, not through taxidermy or plastination, but through something else. Something that involved chemicals I'd never heard of, procedures that seemed equal parts science and ritual. The journals spoke of capturing the essential self, of preserving the moment of being, of subjects who volunteered. Though the details of that volunteering were always vague. The most recent entry was dated a week before she died. The girl from the university will come. She has to. She's perfect. The right age, the right look, the right desperate need for change. And she's blood. That matters. The collection needs blood to continue it. I've prepared everything. Mrs. Peyton knows what to do. The process is ready. All I need is her willing presence, her stay in this house long enough for the atmosphere to prepare her. 3 days. Maybe 4. Then she'll be ready for the final steps. She'll be magnificent. My masterpiece. The doll that will keep the collection alive. My hands went numb. The journal dropped to the floor. I ran. Up the stairs. Through the hallway. Past all those watching dolls. I grabbed my keys, my phone, headed for the front door. It wouldn't open. I pulled, twisted, threw my weight against it. The door remained closed, solid as a wall. I ran to the back door, found it the same. Windows wouldn't open. My phone showed no signal. Behind me, I heard footsteps. Slow. Measured multiple sets. I turned. The dolls were moving. Not smoothly, but with jerking, mechanical motions, like marionettes guided by invisible strings. The 12 from the tea party were first, standing from their chairs with crackling sounds. Then others, emerging from rooms, descending from shelves, a tide of porcelain and cloth and wood, all moving toward me with their glass eyes fixed and staring. And behind them, descending the stairs with slow, careful steps, was the bride doll. She moved more smoothly than the others, almost naturally, and as she drew closer, I saw that her face had changed. It was still the same face, but animated now, alive with an expression I could only call hungry. She opened her mouth, and my grandmother's voice came out, cracked and dusty from disuse. "Welcome home, Vivian. I've been waiting for you." I backed away, but there was nowhere to go. The dolls surrounded me, their hands reaching, their faces unchanging in their painted smiles and stares. It doesn't hurt. My grandmother's voice continued from that beautiful, terrible bride doll. The process is actually quite peaceful. You'll see, you'll understand, and you'll be perfect. My final work, my legacy. Something pricked my arm. I looked down to see one of the dolls holding a syringe, now empty. The world began to go soft at the edges. Don't fight it, my grandmother said. Fighting only makes the preservation less perfect. Just let go. Let it happen. You're going to be beautiful, Vivian. You're going to last forever. I tried to scream, but my jaw wouldn't work properly. I tried to run, but my legs were folding beneath me. The dolls caught me as I fell, their hands surprisingly gentle, lowering me to the floor with care. The last thing I saw before the darkness took me was my grandmother's face in that bride doll, smiling down at me with something that might have been love. When I woke, if waking is the right word, I was in the basement. I was standing upright in a glass case that hadn't been there before. I was wearing clothes I didn't remember putting on. A dress in deep blue that matched my eyes. I tried to move. I could move my eyes, could shift them to look around, but nothing else. My body was rigid, fixed, held in place by something more than just the case. In the reflection of the glass, I could see myself. My skin had a smoothness that wasn't quite right, a perfection that looked almost like porcelain. My hair was arranged just so, every strand in place. My expression was frozen in something like serenity, though inside I was screaming. The bride doll, my grandmother, stood in front of my case, admiring her work. Perfect, she said. Better than I'd even hoped. You're conscious, aren't you? I can see it in your eyes. Don't worry. That fades eventually. Give it a few months, maybe a year. Then you'll just be no thoughts, no fears, no pain. Just existence, preserved, perfect, forever. She reached out and touched the glass, her porcelain hand leaving no mark. I was the first, 50 years ago. The process worked better than I'd dreamed. But it needed to be shared. I needed others to join me, to create a collection, and now you'll carry it forward. Mrs. Peyton has the journals. She'll find the next one, and the next. The collection will grow. Our family's art will continue. But she turned and moved toward the stairs, her wedding dress whispering against the floor. Welcome to the family, Vivian. Welcome home. I stand here now, day after day, night after night. The screaming in my head has quieted somewhat, though it hasn't stopped. I can see the others in their cases around me. Sometimes, when the light is right, I think I can see them moving their eyes too, looking at me, at each other, trapped in the same terrible awareness. Upstairs, I hear Mrs. Peyton moving around, maintaining the house, keeping everything perfect. I hear her talking sometimes, phone conversations about a young man who's looking for a cheap place to stay, who's interested in local history, who would be perfect for the collection. And I know that eventually I'll be upstairs too, arranged in some room watching whoever comes next, waiting, silent, aware. The collection grows. It always grows. And somewhere in the slowly fading part of me that can still think, still feel, I wonder if my mother knew. If that's why she stayed away, why she never spoke of her own mother, why she looked like melting wax when I asked. I wonder if she was the one who escaped. I wonder if she ever came back to check, to see if the house still stood, if the collection still grew. I wonder if she saw dolls that looked familiar. But mostly, I don't wonder anything anymore. Mostly, I just stand and watch and wait. The collection is patient. The collection is forever. The collection is home. Story 8. The school bus appeared the day after the Henderson house burned down. I noticed it on my morning run, parked in the overgrown lot next to where the house had stood. Yellow paint faded to the color of old corn, windows thick with dust. Number 37, barely visible on the side panel. It sat there like it had always been there. Like it belonged to the landscape of charred foundation stones and blackened trees. But it hadn't been there the day before. I was certain of that. I slowed to a walk, staring at the bus. The Henderson house fire had been the talk of our small town for weeks. The family of 4 who died in their sleep. The investigation that found faulty wiring. The funeral with 4 closed caskets, because the bodies had been too burned to view. The lot had been empty since they'd cleared the rubble. Just scorched earth and the smell of ash that rain hadn't quite washed away. Now there was a bus. I pulled out my phone and took a picture, thinking I'd ask around town about it. Maybe the county had parked it there temporarily while they figured out what to do with the lot. Though that didn't make much sense. Why park an old school bus next to a burned site? The photo came out blurry. I tried again, but the second shot was worse. The bus just a yellow smear against the gray morning. My phone had been working fine moments ago. Had taken perfectly clear photos of the sunrise. But every shot of the bus came out distorted, unusable. I pocketed my phone and kept running, but I looked back 3 times before the bus disappeared from view. That afternoon, I asked at the post office about it. Martha, who'd worked the counter for 30 years and knew everything about everyone, just frowned. A bus next to the Henderson lot? Haven't seen any bus there, dear. It's yellow old. Has the number 37 on it. She shook her head slowly. We haven't had bus 37 in this district since I was a girl. That route was discontinued in the 80s after. She paused, something flickering behind her eyes. Well, after the accident. What accident? But she'd already turned away, busying herself with sorting mail that didn't need sorting. When I pressed, she pretended not to hear me. I tried asking at the diner, at the hardware store, at the gas station. No one had seen the bus. No one wanted to talk about bus 37. But I noticed something whenever I mentioned it. The people got quiet. Their eyes would go distant, like they were remembering something they'd rather forget. That night, I drove past the Henderson lot. The bus was still there, more visible somehow in the darkness. Light gleamed behind its dirty windows. Not bright, just a soft amber glow like old incandescent bulbs. As I slowed to look, I thought I saw movement inside. Shapes, small ones, pressing against the windows. Children. I accelerated past, my heart hammering for reasons I couldn't quite name. At home. I did what any reasonable person in the age of information would do. I searched online. Bus 37 and my town's name brought up nothing useful. But when I added accident and 1980s, I found it. A newspaper article from 1983, archived in the State Library database. Tragedy strikes local school district. Bus plunges into ravine, 17 students killed. I read the article 3 times, my coffee growing cold beside me. Bus 37 had been carrying 17 elementary school students home on a rainy October afternoon. The driver, James Corrigan, was a well-liked man who'd driven the route for 12 years without incident. But on that day, on a curve everyone knew was dangerous when wet, the bus had simply kept going straight. Through the guardrail, down the embankment, into the ravine. All 17 students died. The driver survived, but was found wandering in the woods 3 days later, unresponsive. He never spoke another word, spent the rest of his life in a psychiatric facility, and died 2 years after the accident. The article included names. I recognized some of them. Families still in town, still living in the same houses their grandparents had lived in. The Wilsons, the Kowalskis, the Tanners. I'd gone to school with their kids, had never heard any of them mention losing siblings or cousins in a bus accident. But then, maybe that was the kind of tragedy small towns buried. The kind of thing people agreed not to talk about, as if silence could heal what talking kept raw. I looked at the article's date, October 23, 1983. Today was October 22nd. Tomorrow would be the 40th anniversary of the accident. I should have left it alone. Should have marked it down as a strange coincidence and moved on with my life. But I couldn't stop thinking about the light in the bus windows, about the small shapes moving behind the dirty glass. The next morning, I ran past the Henderson lot again. The bus was still there, but different somehow. More solid, more present. The number 37 on its side was clearer, and through the windows I could see them. Children, 17 of them sitting in the seats, wearing clothes from 40 years ago. They stared straight ahead, perfectly still, perfectly silent. I stopped running, stood there on the road, my breath making clouds in the cold October air, and stared back. One of them turned to look at me. A girl, maybe 8 years old, with dark hair and pigtails. She raised her hand and pressed it against the window. Not waving, just pressing, like she was testing whether the glass was real. I heard the bus before I saw it move. The engine turned over with a sound like grinding metal, like something that should have died decades ago, forcing itself back to life. Exhaust coughed from the tailpipe, gray smoke that smelled wrong. Not like diesel, but like burning hair, like scorched earth. The door folded open with a pneumatic hiss. I should have run. Every instinct I possessed screamed at me to run, but I couldn't move. I stood frozen while the bus sat there, engine idling, door open, waiting. "Are you getting on?" A voice from inside, adult, male, tired in a way that went beyond physical exhaustion. "We're almost at the last stop." The driver. I could see him now, sitting in the seat, hands on the wheel. He was transparent, or nearly so, more suggestion than substance. But his eyes were solid, real, looking at me in the rearview mirror. "I'm not." My voice came out hoarse. "I'm not a student." "Everyone's a student," he said. "Everyone's learning something. The question is whether you get on by choice or by circumstance." I don't understand. Neither did I. Not for the longest time. I drove this road for 12 years, you know. 12 years, same roads, same stops, same kids. And then one day, the road went somewhere else, and I couldn't stop the bus. I tried, but my hands wouldn't turn the wheel. Like something else was driving, using my body. "The accident," I whispered. "That's what they called it. But accidents are random. This was specific. This was intended." He turned to look at me fully, and I saw that his face was wrong. Features smeared, like a painting left in the rain. "This was a harvest." "I don't." "The Henderson house," he interrupted. "That wasn't an accident either. Faulty wiring," they said. But wiring doesn't fail that completely, that catastrophically, unless something makes it fail. And it happened here, right next to where we went into the ravine. Right next to where 17 children died. The children on the bus hadn't moved. They still stared straight ahead, patient and silent. Every 40 years, the driver continued, we come back, return to where it happened. And we need to complete the route, need to get to the last stop. But we can't do it without a full bus. We're 4 short. 4 who never got on that day. 4 who stayed home sick or skipped school. And until we find them, until the bus is full, we can't finish. Can't rest. The Hendersons, I said slowly. They were the replacements. 4 people to make up for 4 missing students. Not replacements. Payment. Balance. The thing that drove us into that ravine. It needs balance. 4 lives for 4 lives. 4 deaths to complete what was started. That's insane. Is it? He gestured at the bus. At the children who'd been dead for 40 years. At himself, a ghost driving a vehicle that should have been scrapped decades ago. You're looking at it. How much more proof do you need? I finally managed to step backward, to break whatever had been holding me in place. I'm not getting on that bus. Switch yourself. But the route needs to be completed. If not you, then someone else. The bus doesn't leave until it's full, and the longer it waits, the more persistent it becomes. The door folded shut with a hiss. The bus didn't move, but somehow it felt closer, more present, like it was occupying more space than its physical dimensions allowed. I ran, sprinted all the way home, locked my doors, closed my curtains, called in sick to work, and spent the day researching, trying to understand what I'd seen. The Hendersons had moved to town 3 years ago. They'd bought the lot next to the ravine, built their house there despite locals warning them about the history. They'd seemed like a normal family. 2 parents, 2 kids, living ordinary lives. Until October 22nd, when their house burned down with all 4 of them inside. I found 3 other similar incidents. 1943. 4 members of the Morrison family died in a gas leak. Their house located next to the ravine. 1903. 4 members of the Yates family killed when their wagon overturned, also near the ravine. 1863. 4 people dead from unknown causes, found in a cabin near what would later become the ravine. Every 40 years, like clockwork. 4 deaths always in the same location. But those deaths preceded the bus accident by decades. Whatever was happening, the bus crash hadn't started it. The bus was just the latest iteration of something older, something that had been claiming lives in that spot for over a century. I needed to know more about the 4 students who hadn't been on the bus that day. The article mentioned their names: Rebecca Wilson, Tommy Kowalski, Jennifer Tanner, and Marcus Hughes. Rebecca Wilson still lived in town. I'd seen her at the grocery store just last week, a woman in her late 40s with tired eyes. Tommy Kowalski had moved away after high school. Jennifer Tanner had married and changed her name. Marcus Hughes had died in a car accident in 1995. 3 still living. 3 who'd avoided the bus that day and survived while their classmates died. And every 40 years, 4 people died to balance that debt. The bus was waiting for them. That night, I saw it in my dreams. Not the Henderson lot, but everywhere. Parked outside the grocery store, idling at traffic lights, following me down streets that didn't exist. And the children inside, their faces pressed against the windows, their mouths moving in silent words I couldn't understand. When I woke, it was 3 a.m. My phone showed 17 missed calls, all from unknown numbers. When I checked the voicemails, they were all the same. The sound of children singing. A song I didn't recognize in rounds. The melody building and overlapping until it became something other than music. Something that hurt to hear. I deleted the messages and turned off my phone, but I could still hear the singing. The next day, I went to Rebecca Wilson's house. I had to warn her, had to tell her what I'd seen. She answered the door looking confused, not recognizing me, even though we'd lived in the same town for years. Rebecca Wilson? I asked. That's my maiden name. I'm Rebecca Taylor now. Can I help you? This is going to sound insane, but do you remember October 23rd, 1983? Her face went white. I don't talk about that. You need to. There's a bus. I don't know what you're talking about. She started to close the door. Bus 37. You were supposed to be on it. Why weren't you? She stopped, her hand on the door trembling. I was sick. Stayed home with the flu. I found out the next day when my mother came home crying. All my friends, everyone I'd sat with, played with, grown up with, gone, just gone. And I was alive because I had the fucking flu. It's back, Rebecca. The bus is back. And it's looking for the 4 who weren't there that day. Well, she laughed. but it was the kind of laugh that's close to crying. You think I don't know? You think I haven't seen it every night in my dreams for the past week? That goddamn yellow bus parked outside my window, waiting. I thought I was losing my mind. You're not. It's real. And we need to figure out how to stop it. You can't stop it. She stepped back into her house, resigned. I've had 40 years to think about that day. 40 years of survivor's guilt, wondering why I lived when they died. And now I know. I didn't survive. I just got a longer walk to the same destination. What do you mean? The bus is coming back. Tonight, tomorrow, soon. And when it does, it'll complete its route. It'll pick up the 4 who were missing. Me, Tommy, Jennifer, and Marcus's replacement, I guess. Someone to stand in for him since he already died. And then it'll go to the last stop. Where's the last stop? She looked at me with eyes that had seen too much. Where do you think? The ravine. I left Rebecca's house with more questions than answers. If she was right. If the bus was coming back to complete its route, then 3 people were in danger. But how could I stop something that had been happening every 40 years for over a century? I found Jennifer Tanner, now Jennifer Ross, at her job at the library. When I mentioned the bus, she went pale and asked me to meet her after work. We sat in her car in the parking lot as the sun set, and she told me the same story. She'd seen the bus in her dreams. She knew it was coming. Tommy won't talk to anyone, she said. I called him last week, tried to warn him. He hung up on me. Moved 3 states away after high school and never looked back. I think he's trying to outrun it. Can you outrun it? Could the Hendersons outrun their house burning down? She shook her head. Whatever this is, distance doesn't matter. It's not about where you are. It's about where you were, or should have been. That night, I went back to the Henderson lot. The bus was still there, but different now. More real, more solid. The rust was gone. The paint looked fresh. The windows were clean. It looked exactly like it must have looked on that October day in 1983, when it had picked up 17 children who would never come home. The door was open. I walked toward it, not because I wanted to, but because something was pulling me. The same force that had pulled the driver's hands on the wheel, the same force that had ignited faulty wiring in the Henderson house. At the steps, I stopped. Inside, the children sat in their seats, silent and still. But they were more defined now, more present. I could see their faces clearly. Young, innocent, caught forever in the moment before the crash. You're not one of the 4. The driver's voice clearer now. He looked more solid, too. More like a real person and less like a ghost. Why do you keep coming back? I'm trying to understand. Trying to find a way to stop this. There's no stopping it. It's been happening for over 160 years. Maybe longer. Every 40 years, the debt comes due. What debt? What did the 4 students owe? Nothing. They don't owe anything. This isn't about them. He turned to look at me fully. It's about the place. The ravine. Something lives there, has always lived there, and every 40 years it gets hungry. It needs to be fed. The bus accident, the families before, the ones that'll come after, we're all just meals, ways to deliver what it needs. 4 lives at specific times from specific bloodlines. The 4 who missed the bus that day. They were from old families that have been in this town since it was founded. Their ancestors made a deal way back to keep something contained, to keep feeding it so it wouldn't spread, and the debt passes down through generations. I thought about what he'd said. Then why did the Hendersons die? They weren't from old families. They were substitutes. The thing in the ravine is patient, but it's not infinitely patient. If it can't get the right people at the right time, it'll take what it can get. But it's not satisfied. Not fully. It'll keep trying until it gets what it really wants. The 3 survivors. And 1 more. Someone to replace Marcus Hughes. Someone from his bloodline. He looked at me with ancient, tired eyes. You're Rebecca Wilson's granddaughter, aren't you? The world tilted. No. My grandmother's name was Susan. Susan Reed. Reed was her married name. Her maiden name was Wilson. Rebecca's older sister. She had the flu too that week. Stayed home, survived. And you're her granddaughter, which makes you part of the bloodline. Part of the debt. I backed away from the bus, my heart hammering. I'm not getting on that bus. You will. They all will. Tomorrow night, when the anniversary is complete. The bus will come, and the 4 who should have died 40 years ago will climb aboard. And then we'll complete the route. We'll go to the last stop, to the ravine, and we'll deliver what's owed. And then what? After the debt is paid, then we rest. The 17 students, me, everyone who's been part of this route. We finally get to stop. For 40 years, anyway, until the cycle begins again. I ran. Back to my car, back home, my mind racing. I called Rebecca, told her what I'd learned. She listened in silence, then sighed. So that's it then. We were always going to die. Just 40 years later than we should have. There has to be a way out. There has to be. There isn't. Don't you see? My sister tried to escape. Moved across the country, changed her name, started a new life. And she still ended up back here when you were born. The bloodline always comes back. The debt always comes due. Then we fight. We refuse to get on the bus. And what happens to the 17 children? To the driver? To everyone who's been trapped for 40 years? They deserve rest. And if we don't pay, the thing in the ravine will just take someone else. More Hendersons. More innocent people who have nothing to do with this. So we're just supposed to sacrifice ourselves. We're supposed to honor the deal our ancestors made. To keep something terrible contained by feeding it just enough to stay satisfied. 4 lives every 40 years, versus the hundreds or thousands it would take if it ever got loose. I wanted to argue, to find a flaw in her logic. But deep down, I knew she was right. The deal had been made long ago. and we were just the latest installment in a debt that stretched back generations. The next night, October 23rd, 40 years to the day since the accident, I walked to the Henderson lot at midnight. Rebecca was already there, standing in front of the bus. Jennifer arrived moments later. We waited together in silence. At 12:47 a.m., the exact time the bus had gone over the ravine in 1983, the door opened. "Last call," the driver said. "Last chance to complete the route." Rebecca climbed on first, then Jennifer. They sat in the front seats, next to children who'd been their friends 40 years ago, who'd stayed 8 years old, while they'd grown into middle age. I stood at the bottom of the steps, looking up at the driver. "What about Tommy?" "There's supposed to be 4. "Tommy's on his way. You'll see." I climbed aboard. The bus was warm inside, despite the October cold. It smelled like school buses always smell. Diesel and vinyl, and the particular scent of children. The students didn't look at us. They stared straight ahead, patient and eternal. I sat in the back, next to a boy who might have been 9. His name tag said, Marcus Hughes. "You're not Marcus," I said quietly. "No, but I'm from his family. His nephew. I died in a car accident in 1995, and they brought me here. Made me part of the debt. I've been waiting for 28 years. I'm sorry." He shrugged. "It's not so bad. The waiting. You go numb after a while." The engine started. Not the grinding, painful sound from before, but smooth, strong. The bus pulled out of the lot and onto the road. We drove through town, past houses where people slept, unaware that a bus full of ghosts was rolling past their windows. At the edge of town, we picked up one more passenger. Tommy Kowalski stood at the side of the road, waiting. He looked older than he should. Not late 40s like the others, but ancient, dried up. He climbed on slowly and sat without a word. The bus was full now. 21 passengers, counting me and Tommy and Rebecca and Jennifer. 17 children from 1983 and 4 from the bloodlines that owed the debt. We drove toward the ravine. I don't know what I expected at the last stop. Maybe the bus would drive off the edge, replaying the accident. Maybe we'd all die the way those 17 students had died. But that's not what happened. The bus stopped at the edge of the ravine, in exactly the spot where it had broken through the guardrail. The door opened, and the children filed out. They walked to the edge and simply stepped off, one by one, dropping into the darkness below without sound or fear. Then it was our turn. Rebecca went first, then Jennifer, then Tommy. Each of them walked to the edge and stepped off into nothing. I was the last one on the bus, except for the driver. "Will it hurt?" I asked. "No. You just go to sleep. And when you wake up, you're wherever you're supposed to be." And the 17 students, do they finally rest? They do. You gave them that. All of you did. I walked to the front of the bus, stood at the door, looked down into the ravine. I couldn't see the bottom. Just darkness that seemed to go on forever. "Thank you," the driver said quietly, "for completing the route, for getting us to the last stop." I stepped off the bus and fell into darkness. I'm writing this from somewhere else, somewhere between. I've been here for what feels like hours or years. Time doesn't work the same way in this place. But I can see the world above, can watch the living go about their lives. The bus is gone from the Henderson lot. Rebecca and Jennifer and Tommy are officially listed as missing. 3 unexplained disappearances on the same night. The police are investigating, but they won't find anything. In 40 years, the bus will return. Another 4 from the bloodlines will be called. Another debt will be paid. And the thing in the ravine will sleep, satisfied, until the cycle begins again. I don't know where the 17 students are now. I hope they're at peace. I hope they finally got to rest. As for me, I'm waiting. Not sure what I'm waiting for, but I'm patient. Like the boy said, you go numb after a while. The bus is always running its route, and there's always room for one more passenger, always one more stop to make. And with that, our time tonight comes to an end. To everyone who stayed until the very last moment, thank you. Truly, having you here sharing these shadows makes the darkness feel a little less empty. I'm grateful you chose to spend a piece of your night here with me. I hope these stories brought you that quiet shiver, the kind that makes you feel alive. There's something special about this, all of us, connected by the love of a good story, whispered in the dark. I'll be back soon with more echoes from the void, more mysteries waiting to be told. Until then, rest well, sleep deeply, and if you hear footsteps that shouldn't be there, just remember they're only stories. Oh, and before you drift off, if you enjoyed our time together, a like and a subscribe will make sure we meet again, somewhere in the dark. Thanks for listening. I'll see you next time.